Colleagues, let me call you to order, everyone. My name is Bob Ray. I'm the Vice President of the ASP for a few more days. And I'm acting as your chairman this morning. We're going to call the meeting to order, if you don't mind. Thank you. We're going to deal, first of all, with the issue of credentials. It should go fairly quickly. Item 7, credentials of representatives of states at the 22nd session. In accordance with Rule 25 of the Rules of Procedure, Credentials Committee, consisting of representatives of 9 states parties, shall be appointed each session. At the first plenary meeting on the 4th of December, the Assembly appointed 8 members of the Credentials Committee. At its 12th meeting, the Bureau recommended that the Assembly appoint Argentina as the 9th member. May I take it the Assembly agrees to appoint Argentina as the 9th member of the Credentials Committee? Seeing no objection, it is so decided. We're now going to turn to the issue of the budget, considerations and adoption of the budget for the 22nd financial year. We will first hear from the registrar, Mr. Osvaldo Zavalla Aguilar, and then a presentation by the chair of the Committee on Budget and Finance, better known as CBF, Mr. Bernard Drummel. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. It's much appreciated. So I will draw your attention to the documentation before the Assembly, in particular the following documents. The proposed program budget of the ICC for 2024, which is document ICC/ASP/22/10, the report of the Committee on Budget and Finance and the work of its 40th session, document ICC-ASP/22/5, the report of the Committee on Budget and Finance on the work of its 41st session, document ICC-ASP22/15, and the report of the Committee on Budget and Finance on the work of its 42nd session, document ICC-ASP/22/20. Additional relevant documentation is indicated in the annotated list of items on the provisional agenda, ICC-ASP/22/1, add.1. I now invite the registrar of the court, Mr. Osvaldo Zavalla Aguilar, to present the court's proposed program budget for 2024. In so doing, I would like to say to the registrar that he has taken on this job at a challenging time. There's never not been a challenging time for the court, but he's taken on at a particularly challenging time because of the events and situations which he's already described to member states. On behalf of the presidency, I want to express my appreciation to him and now give him the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, Your Excellency, Vice President of the Assembly of States Parties, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It is my honor to address this Assembly in my capacity as Registrar of the International Criminal Court. While this 22nd session of the Assembly of States Parties is my first as Registrar, my first session of the ASP was at the 4th session in 2005, when I participated as a delegate for the coalition of the International Criminal Court. Later on, I joined the court itself and have worked for the court ever since. During this time, I have seen with my own eyes the ICC mature into an international institution of considerable relevance for the international community as a whole. I have seen its mandate permeate the structures and the processes that sustain international peace, security, and justice. The success of this institution is something I am wholeheartedly committed to, and I will continue to serve the court with my utmost dedication and skill. That success, of course, can only be realized thanks to you, the states parties. This is your court. You have created this institution and you sustain it. And the court is grateful for your political, financial, and other support and cooperation throughout all these years. In this regard, I would like to join others before me in welcoming Armenia as a 124th state party to the Rome Statute. Armenia's ratification is another testament to the court's continuing relevance in addressing impunity for atrocity crimes. I have seen a clear need for a paradigm shift. We are on the cusp of a new era that brings with it new challenges, in particular in the area of security for the court and the threat to its independence. We are operating now in a much more aggressive environment than the one when the court was established 25 years ago, carried at the time by the almost unanimous international momentum for accountability and progress. Because when that abstract pledge to accountability is being turned into reality, challenges and oppositions arise. The court experienced it a few years ago when it was subject to coercive measures, and it is experiencing even more threatening circumstances today. The new environment is pushing us, the court, to change and to look into re-evaluating existing risks and seriously examining new ones. Today, the court is being targeted. Its operations, its officials, and those collaborating with its mandate are being targeted. Arrest warrants against the prosecutor and a number of ICC judges, including the president, have been issued. The court was subject to an unprecedented cyber attack a couple of months ago, the consequences of which are still with us today and will be for the foreseeable future. Last year, the court prevented, with the help of the host state, a serious attempt to infiltrate by a hostile state agent. On our part, the court and the registry have been taking stronger, more focused, and more strategic efforts to change. Thanks in large part to the independent expert review, we have re-examined our processes and made a number of significant improvements in different areas. We have made efforts in improving our workplace culture, including through the introduction of two new important functions in the court, the ombuds and the focal point for gender equality. Earlier this year, for the first time in the history of the court, 4 strategic plans of the court, of the registry, of the Office of the Prosecutor, and of the Trust Fund for Victims were closely coordinated and published at the same time. Mr. Vice President, as I have indicated, we work for an organization that has gone through profound changes in its visibility, its overall impact, and as such, its risks. The culture of the organization has grown and has to change to fit into its new environment. But such efforts require guidance, vision, and purpose. The challenges ahead, the challenges today, entail responsibility for those of us leading the institution to set the tone, to lead by example, and to do so with clarity, meaning, and intent. Both geographical representation and gender balance are a matter of legitimacy for the court. The court serves the international community's pursuit of justice and accountability. The court thus must be reflective of and fostered by the values, principles, and rich experiences of the international community that constitutes it, of the different legal systems of the world. And it must do so with due regard to diversity of its workforce more broadly, including a balanced gender representation at all levels of its hierarchy. The composition of the court's personnel and the way that composition is perceived has a direct impact on the credibility of the institution and its operations. We are adapting ourselves to the new era, and we have taken a more strategic approach to make this institution more agile, more efficient, and more legitimate. Together with the President and the Prosecutor, and after a thorough consultation with our staff and personnel, we will be launching the core-wide ICC core values early next year. I consider the core values of the court as a platform that must allow the personnel and the organization itself to model behavior, aspirations, and expectations to principles that are organic to our culture. But it is also important that the organization also crafts values that reflect both the court's long-term aspirations and its foundations. Indeed, the selection of the core values should be done with endurance in mind. As such, while addressing and reflecting on present challenges is essential, our values should also possess a timeless quality. Our work continues, and we cannot do it alone. We are in the middle of the novel challenges. Security is a fundamental, existential issue. Security is important not only because the court is ensuring the safety of our witnesses, of our operations, of those collaborating with the court, and of its officials and personnel. It is also important because the ability of the court to work in a secure manner is essential to its judicial independence. Lack of security impedes the proper implementation of the court's mandate and delegitimizes the institution. So while the court is painfully aware of the new paradigm shift that is taking place, we need you, the states parties, to be fully aware of this shift too. We need you to enhance the court's capabilities to fulfill its mandate, as well as its defenses against outside threats. The relationship between the court and its states parties is based on trust. Your trust in the court's ability to fulfill its mandate in an efficient, independent, and impartial manner, and our continued trust in you, the states parties, that enable us to do so. Mr. Vice President, the court proposed 204 million euros for the proposed program budget for 2024, representing an increase of 27.18 million euros, or 15.7% over the approved budget for 2023 of 173.2 million euros. Of this total increase, approximately 15.6 million euros correspond to fund new requirements across various investigations, trials, and judicial activities, while 11.6 million corresponds to unavoidable inflationary pressures, including the increases in the UN Common System costs. In 2024, resources are needed to run and support trial hearings and the corresponding workload in 3 cases throughout the year: the Abdel al-Rahman case, the Yekato Manengalzona case, and the Said case, as well as in the Al-Hassan case in the beginning of the year. The Office of the Prosecutor is expected to carry out active investigations in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Darfur, Libya, Palestine, Philippines, Ukraine, and Venezuela. The Trust Fund for Victims will be even more active in 2024 than this year. It will continue implementing reparation programs in the Lubanga and the Al-Mahdi cases, and will start full reparation programs stage also in the Entaganda case, and commence the process for the reparations in the Onwen case. Importantly, early next year, the Trust Fund will conclude the first ever full implementation of reparations in the Katanga case. I fully recognize that these demands have led to a request for a substantial increase, but I can assure you that they have come only after all measures have been taken to first and foremost find savings, efficiencies, and reductions to our budget, as well as a reprioritization of our resources. In the registry alone, the total reductions amounted to approximately 5.3 million euros. Considering the court's request for 2024, the Committee on Budget and Finance recommended a net increase of 15.15 million euros, or 8.7%, compared to 2023 approved budget of 173.2 million. Among the recommended reductions, the committee did not endorse the approval of 3 million euros in expected additional UN Common System costs in 2024, nor the resources requested to ensure the security of our operations. Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we have a shared responsibility to ensure a sustainable future for the court. The court's responsibility, my responsibility, is to put forward to you the requirements of the court to carry out its important mandate, after all measures to find savings and efficiencies have been taken. We have done that. Your responsibility as states parties is to carefully consider and decide on the court's requirements. And I fully recognize that in the current economic and financial circumstances in many of our states parties, this is not an easy decision. So I thank you. My responsibility is also to ensure operational sustainability and the diligent use of the resources allocated by you. The contingency fund was established to ensure prosecutorial and judicial independence, to ensure that in the light of unforeseen developments, when new crimes need to be investigated or a new arrest warrant is implemented, the court has the resources to implement its mandate. The contingency fund is therefore much more than a reserve fund. It is directly linked to the sustainability of judicial and prosecutorial independence. Mr. Vice President, before I conclude, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our ICC President, Judge Piotr Hofmanski, whose mandate will come to an end soon, for his great leadership and personally for his support in my first year as registrar. Thank you, Piotr, for having been an inspiration, a guide, and an example in responsible leadership. My congratulations to our 6 newly elected judges. I look forward to ensuring adequate support to your important work ahead. I would also like to thank the outgoing ASP President, Silvia Fernandez de Gourmendi, for her adamant and unwavering support to the court and the Rome Statute system, as well as outgoing Vice Presidents Ambassador Ray and Ambassador Sequenzova for their excellent work and coordination in New York and in The Hague, respectively. My congratulations to the newly elected ASP President, Ambassador Caucuranta, as well as the 2 new Vice Presidents, Ambassador Kasangana and Ambassador Kanu. My special thanks go to the budget facilitator, Ambassador Milenkovic, for the productive cooperation, skillful leadership, and the many efforts in addressing multiple and complex budgetary issues, as well as to Ambassador Drummond for the important work done by the Committee on Budget and Finance. And last but not least, my congratulations to the newly elected CBF members with whom I look forward to working in the coming years. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the challenges the court faces are serious and threatening. Often, it is with hindsight that we can evaluate our decisions. But if history is what we will tomorrow think of today, responsibility is what we today think of tomorrow. I am confident that this Assembly will make the right decisions for the future of your court and of your Rome Statute system. I thank you.
I want to thank the Registrar very much for his intervention and for his report. And I now give the floor to the Chair of the Committee on Budget and Finance, Ambassador Bernard Drummond. Bernard, the floor is yours.
Mr. Vice President, thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to address you today and to present the main outcomes of our discussions at the 41st and the 42nd session of the CBF. At the outset, I would like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow colleagues from the committee for their devotion and hard work during this year, and also to the representatives of the court for their availability and cooperation. My thanks and appreciation goes also to the Executive Secretary, to the CBF and his team for their quality and outstanding support, which is essential for the fulfillment of the committee's mandate. Let me start with some of the challenges the court will be facing in 2024. First, United Nations Common System and inflation. The committee recognized that the increase of staff costs by the UNCS and inflation will impact unavoidably the court's future obligations towards its staff and various contracting partners, and concurred with the court that some kind of prevention should be established. Currently, those increases are absorbed in the approved budget, resulting in the budget being inflated to allow that absorption. The committee was of the opinion that a reserve for UNCS increases could bring more transparency and thus more trust into the budgeting process. However, the committee was not convinced by the proposal to change the salary increases, to charge the salary increases decided by the ICSC costs to the contingency fund, and requested the court to provide a report on the issue of financial risks deriving from the UNCS increases, including the proposal for a reserve fund at its 44th session in April 24. In addition to the already certain increases, the court has, however, proposed an additional estimated increase of 2.9 million for salaries for 24. As these costs are not yet certain, the committee recommended that the Assembly not approve the additional increase of 2.9 million. Second, contingency fund. The contingency fund currently has a cash balance of 2.2 million. A notification for an amount of 2.3 million was recently received by the committee. These expenses will be absorbed by the regular budget as has been assured by the registry at the end of this year. The committee continues, however, to be of the view that state parties should replenish the contingency fund to its notional level of 7 million to provide the court with the flexibility to react to unforeseen situations. Third, liquidity. The outlook for the liquidity of the court has significantly improved, and there may be no liquidity shortfall in 2023. That improvement, however, was due to a major payment of areas at the beginning of the year and is only sustainable if states parties pay their contributions to the court's budget in full and on time. Fourth, security. Security is, as much as the IT area, a cross-cutting issue all over the institution. The registry had calculated for the proposed program budget an amount of 1.6 million in security requirements. The requested resources aiming to make substantial improvements to the court security systems and should have an impact on the operation of the institution and its technological security, including by providing protection to all actors involved at headquarters, country offices, and during investigation-related activities. In this context, IT security is key. Most of the court's operations are fully IT dependent. A failure in the systems or a security breach could potentially shut down the court's operations. Cybersecurity has therefore been a particular focus of attention in the committee's consideration of the IT-related budget items. The cybersecurity incident, which happened after the committee's autumn session, very much underlined the risks and the impact on the court's operations. As we understand, the IT architecture needs a redesign to reinforce the institutional resilience in the face of the increasing security risks. According to the registrar, substantial additional resources are being required. The intention of the registrar is to establish a trust fund on security with a total of 17 million, I understand, to receive voluntary contributions to improve the court security, including the reinforcement of physical facilities, strengthening of digital infrastructure, and prevention of strengthening the protection of sensitive information, both in headquarters and in country offices. The committee will specifically deal with security issues related to the establishment of the trust fund at its 44th session in April 2024. Fifth, OTP Trust Fund for advanced technology and specialized capacity. The committee noted that total contribution received or pledged to the trust fund amounted to about 22 million received from state parties, including the contribution of 7.2 from the European Commission, among which 5.1 million had already been spent and 8.1 million was allotted. The OTP Trust Fund has been operational for now the second year now. Its activities have been supplementary to the court's core activities. It has allowed the OTP to address challenges, in particular with respect to the harnessing of advanced technology, improvements which would have become necessary anyway, without seeking additional resources in the program budget. And also this, whilst most of the support services of the court can provide assistance to the trust fund activities within existing capacities, it is clear that it had an impact on the regular budget. Furthermore, other trust funds, such as on complementarity and cooperation, have been announced. However, no concrete proposals yet have been received by the committee. Sixth, secondment of personnel. The committee was informed that as of September 23, the OTP had 60 national experts on secondment from 19 states parties, including 20 investigators, 6 lawyers, 5 prosecutors, 10 analysts, and other specialists. Currently, 13 different unified teams presently benefit from secondees, as well as a number of specialized thematic teams. The court has received an indication of the possibility of extension or replacement for 25 secondees in 2024. The committee was also informed by the OTP that the OTP will transit its request for secondments to more specialized technical fields in support of its analytical activities, and that a new note verbal outlining these new requirements will be circulated to states parties. As for the impact of the secondees, the increased onboard procedures, medical clearance and training have created additional work and cost for the court, especially related to the registry. The committee recommended to mitigate negative impacts, but also to profit from a knowledge transfer between secondees and the court. The committee also recommended that the court consider the possibility of taking the support costs of about 13%, so that not only on this, but also maybe on future funds, so that the registry could also benefit and impact and mitigate the impact of such funds. Seventh, legal aid reform. The committee reviewed the second reform proposal on legal aid and received presentations from both the court and the International Criminal Court Bar Association on its various aspects, such as working conditions and remuneration, and recommended the implementation in full of the so-called Scenario B as a minimum. The reform proposal is multifaceted and seeks to deliver a wide range of improvements. Eighth, premises. As for the premises, The committee took note of the consultant's report, ICC Headquarters Premises Assessment and Elaboration Capital Replacement Plan, which the authors presented to the committee. In light of the late presentation of the mentioned report, the court had not yet presented a report on its assessment to the committee. The committee therefore requested the court a report on its assessment of this proposed plan on the future contract setup and multi-year financing plan for its next session in spring 2024. The upkeep of the premises will remain a challenge. The commitment of state parties to reliable long-term funding will be necessary. Appropriate decisions should be taken by next year. Finally, the evaluation of the Secretariat of the ASP. The committee took note and welcomed the decision by the Bureau to have an assessment of the Secretariat that will take place in 2024. Such assessment should aim at increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of the Secretariat, taking also in consideration the specific needs and requirements of the proper functioning of the CBF and the Audit Committee. Therefore, the two committees should be consulted during this process. And finally, Mr. Vice President, consideration of the 2024 proposed program budget. The court requested a proposed program budget of 200.4 million, including the host state's loan of 3.59 million. The 2024 proposed program budget represented an increase of 15.7% or 27.2 million against the total approved budget for 2023. The committee carefully considered the budget assumptions, judicial activities, and workload, taking into consideration the pressure of inflation in prices and the previous trends in costs. The committee particularly recommended important reductions in staff resources. In assessing the need of the requested resources, the committee had to take into account various factors, such as the level of activities, the existing resources and past experiences, the secondees provided by states parties, the number of long-term vacant posts which are not under recruitment, access to extra budgetary resources by the prosecutor, and generally, the very limited recruitment capacity. Even with the significant reductions in staff resources, increases in the budget will have to be expected. A budget in 2025 will have to be expected, since basically all new GTAs positions are funded only partially in 2024 for a range between 2 and 6 months, and will highly likely have to be funded at 100% in 2025. After carefully reviewing, therefore, the budget proposal and the justifications provided, the committee concluded that total reductions could be achieved in the amount of 12 million. This represents an adjusted total increase of 15.2 million or 8.7% compared to this year's budget, including the host state loan. It is worth mentioning that the total increase of 15.2 million included a total amount of 8.7 million, or 57% of the total increase, related to the unavoidable increase from the inflation and the UNCS. The committee considered that in spite of these substantive reductions, the operations of the court will not be negatively impacted. This concludes my remarks, Mr. Vice President. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Werner, for that presentation. I think it speaks to incredible dedication on the part of the committee. I think we all have to recognize that we all work as volunteers in these jobs, and they are incredibly important in assessing how the court can go forward. And there will, of course, be further opportunities for this assembly to consider issues of the budget as we continue meeting through next week. So I'm now going to turn your attention to agenda item number 17, which is consideration of the audit reports, which I draw your attention to the following documentation before the assembly, including the financial statements of the court for the year ending on the 31st of December 2022, which is document ICC-ASP/22/12, the financial statements of the Trust Fund for Victims of the Year ended 31st December, document ICC-ASP/22/13, and the External Auditor's Performance Audit Report on Legal Aid, which is document ICC-ASP/22/38. The Assembly will also consider the reports of the Audit Committee on its 17th and 18th sessions, which are available on the website of the Assembly. And I will first give the floor to Mr. Werner Drummel, who will deliver a statement on behalf of the Chair of the Audit Committee, Mr. Faisal Chowdhury. So once again, Mr. Drummel, you're in the chair.
Thank you very much. Being also a member of the AC, I have been asked to provide this briefing. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today and to present the main outcomes of our discussions at the 17th and 18th session of the AC, of the Audit Committee. Like for the CBF, I also want to take this opportunity to reiterate my appreciation to the colleagues in the committee for their devotion and hard work, and also to the representatives of the court for their participation and valuable contributions. And I also would like to thank the Secretary to the AC and his team for their constant hard work and effective support to the committee throughout the year, upon which we rely. The 17th and 18th session were held in The Hague in March and July of this year. I will now briefly summarize the main discussions of the committee sessions. The committee focused at its two sessions on oversight of internal and external audit matters, on risk management, and on ethics. First, oversight of internal audit matters. As part of its oversight of internal audit matters, the committee discussed the audit reports of the Office of Internal Audit, OIA, the status of implementation of the 2022 and 2023 internal audit plan, work plan for the 2023 and draft work plan for next year, the annual report of the OIA on the implementation of audit recommendations in 2022, the Charter of the Office of Internal Audit, and finally, the status of selecting an external assessor for the internal audit function. The committee made a number of observations to enhance the efficiency of internal audit in the area of planning, staff deployment, and client engagement. The AC recommended that annual OIA work plans be approved by COCO on a timely basis so that the OIA can operate based on an institutionally approved plan, and noted that approval of the OIA work plan for the 23 for this year had only been approved well into the year. The committee was informed that the draft work plan for 2024 was expected to be ready in autumn 2023. The committee suggested that the OIA maintain a multi-year rolling work plan to give a better indication of the scope of risk coverage over time and to facilitate the audit planning process. The AC noted that a significant number of audit recommendations were still outstanding. In this context, the committee reiterated the importance of tone of the top, which is generally recognized as foundational to an effective control environment. Unless there were clear signals that senior management was fully supportive of the importance of the internal audit function, collaborative execution of audit work, and a clear focus on implementing audit recommendations would not be accorded the required priority. Without this, if there were to be a significant access control breach or security incident, it would be difficult to explain and defend. The AC reviewed the OIA Charter and suggested some amendments. The AC requested that it be updated at its 19th session. The AC noted that an external assessment of OIA is planned and was briefed and consulted on the process for selection of an external assessor. The AC will monitor the external assessment process, meeting with the external assessor as needed. Second, oversight of external audit matters. As part of its oversight of external audit matters, the committee discussed the financial statements of the court for the year 22, the financial statements of the Trust Fund for Victims for the same year, and the external auditor's report on temporary personnel, legal aid, and the status of performance audit on cybersecurity. With regards to financial statements of the court for the year 2022, the committee was pleased that the external auditor has issued an unqualified audit opinion. The committee noted that the external auditor recommended that the court comprehensively review its staff regulations and rules, administrative instructions and guidelines, given that the purpose of ICC Regulation 3.1 is to be in conformity with UN regulations and rules, in order to strengthen the efficiency of the staff costs budget. The AC noted that the court did not plan to review the full set of rules, only a subset of the relevant ones. With regards to the financial statements of the Trust Fund for Victims, the committee was pleased that the external auditor has also issued an unqualified audit opinion. The opinion, the AC was, however, not convinced by the external auditor's interpretation of IPSAS 19 concerning the liability and obligations with regard to the provision established to discharge the reparation orders issued by chambers. The external auditor considered that the convicted person and the Trust Fund for Victims shared the liability created by a reparations order. The Trust Fund for Victims Management disagreed with this interpretation. The AC supported management's interpretation of the relevant accounting standard that a third party, in this case the Trust Fund for Victims, cannot assume liability that has already been legally assigned via a court order to another party, in this case the convicted. The AC urged management to continue discussions with the external auditor on this matter during the next financial statement preparation cycle. With regard to the audit report of the external auditor on legal aid, the committee noted the important deficiencies highlighted and was pleased to be informed that the registry has created a specific unit to focus on judicial cooperation, which will also focus on indigence assessment and follow-up on outstanding cooperation. The AC noted that the legal aid reform was submitted to the CBF for its consideration before it is approved by the Assembly. With regard to the audit on cybersecurity, the AC noted that the scope of the audit assignment was being discussed with the court and stressed the need for robust policies and timely implementation in this important area. Third, risk management. The AC noted that the court's overall operational risk consolidation was updated to include 200 risks in accordance with its 10th update report on risk management. In discussing the status of outstanding OIA recommendations in the context of overall risk management, the AC noted that there was a lack of clarity and consistency in the way that old outstanding items were viewed and presented. In some cases, implementation of these recommendations was still planned, but with low priority. In others, implementation was delayed because of dependency on developments in other areas. And yet in others, the recommendations were in effect rejected. No actions planned, with the implication that the associated risks were accepted and not deemed consequential. In the context of overall risk management and the seriousness with which OIA recommendations are viewed, the AC believes that there should be clarity and consistency in this area and a clear linkage to overall risk management and organizational risk appetite. While implementing a risk management process is a foundational step, the challenge is to develop a risk management culture across the organization that is consistent with the risk management appetite. The AC will continue to monitor the evolution of risk management within the organization at its future meetings. Fourth, ethics. The AC noted the further delay in issuing the ethics charter and acknowledged the registrar's involvement and the guidance provided on the next procedural steps, which is expected to be presented to principals of the court by the end of this year for validation and adoption. The AC reiterated that while ethics charter is the foundation document on which a robust ethics and internal justice system can be built, work still needs to be done to achieve this ultimate objective and should be given a high priority. The AC requested that the court submit the adopted court-wide ethics charter at its 19th session. And finally, Audit Committee Charter. The AC continued to review its charter to ensure that it reflected the current organizational context and was in line with IIA standards and best practice. Mr. Vice President, allow me to conclude by underlining that since its re-establishment, the Audit Committee has worked assiduously to be a catalyst in triggering important improvements in the areas within its mandate. We seek not only to provide an additional layer of accountability to the Assembly, but the AC has also to constructively engage with all actors in the various areas of its mandate to achieve tangible progress in the reduction of risks, the identification of risk mitigating measures, to maintain financial integrity through robust internal control and financial reporting processes, and to contribute to greater efficiency and effectiveness of the business processes of this organization. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Drummel, for your intervention. I'm now going to give the floor to the representative of the external auditor, Mr. Yang Chan Cho.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it's an honor to be here on behalf of the external auditor. The external auditor, Mr. Jae-hae Choi, Chair of the Board of Audit and Inspection of Korea, expresses his deep regret for not being able to make this presentation himself. In accordance with Article 12 of the Code Financial Regulations and Rules, the external auditor conducted independent audit for financial year 2022 during 2023. I would like to give you a brief overview of the 3 audit reports which were issued in 2023 by the external auditor. Financial statements of the ICC for the year ended 31st December 2022. Financial statement of the Trust Fund for Victims for the year ended 31st December 2022. And performance audit on legal aid. Based on the financial audit, the external auditor believes that the accompanying financial statement present fairly in all material respects for the 2022, and audit evidence that has been obtained is sufficient and appropriate. Therefore, the external auditor provided unmodified audit opinion on the 2022 financial statement for both the ICC and the Trust Fund for Victims. Now, I would like to address the audit report on the financial statement of the International Criminal Court for the financial year 2022. Regarding the financial performance, the total revenues increased mainly due to increase in assessed contributions and voluntary contributions from establishment of OTP Trust Fund. The total expenses increased mainly due to employee benefit expenses related to increase in staff payroll from application of revised UN salary table and post-adjustment. Overall, the deficit was reduced to 3.9 million euro in 2022. Regarding the financial position, it was found that the total asset decreased by 2.3%. The decrease was mainly from annual depreciation of property, plant, and equipment, and reimbursement right of discontinued judge pension plan. On the other hand, the total liabilities decreased by 11%. The decrease was mostly from reduced employee benefit liabilities by changes in actuarial assumptions, such as increase in discount rate used. Meanwhile, deferred revenue and accrued expenses increased, most of which is due to voluntary contribution of OTP Trust Fund deferred to 2023. Especially, this year's audit on ICC payroll was conducted in light of the following circumstances. First, the proposed program budget amount for 2023 increased sharply compared to 2022. And this huge increase was exceptionally approved by the ASP. Second, the staff cost represented 72% of the increased amount due to factors such as revised salary scale and increase in post-adjustment during 2022. Third, the outlook for the court's liquidity has significantly worsened due to outstanding contribution payment. The external auditor recommended that the court comprehensively review its step regulations and rules, administrative instructions and guidelines, considering the purpose of ICC Regulation 3.1 to be in conformity with UN step regulations and rules in order to strengthen the efficiency of step cost budget. The external auditor made this recommendation because he believed that the ASP judgment is necessary to determine whether differences in UN and ICC rules are reasonable due to the unique organizational needs, and whether the benefits brought to the ICC from these differences offset the higher step cost. Also, it was recommended that the court review its guidelines in order to strengthen the transparency and integrity of determination of step on initial recruitment and establish procedures to enhance management of education grant advances, such as specific deadlines and limitation of subsequent advances without previous unsettlement. Now, I would like to present the audit report on the financial statement of the Trust Fund for Victims, including its financial position and financial performance for its 2022 financial statement. Regarding the financial performance, Trust Fund for Victims maintained the same deficit as in 2021, with the deficit falling slightly. The main reason was that the 2022 voluntary contribution income did not exceed the program cost. The total revenue increased by 7.3% due to the increase in voluntary donations. Regarding the financial position, Trust Fund of Victims' total assets decreased due to a decline in cash and cash equivalent. Trust Fund for Victims has no financial liabilities, and the provisions related to reparation programs amount to 3.7 million euros, which is about 60% of the total liabilities, while the net asset capital decreased. The external auditor recommended implementing measures to strengthen cash internal controls to mitigate the risk of excessive cash holdings and to ensure compliance with MOD regulations. It was also recommended that, given the higher inherent risk associated with cash, Trust Fund for Victims should establish a method to directly pay compensation to the victims whenever possible. In unavoidable situations where indirect payment is necessary, written consent needs to be obtained. Additionally, since indirect cash compensation increases the related risks, the auditor advised implementing additional verification procedures. In addition, the external auditor recommended establishing a monitoring control at Trust Fund for Victims headquarters to retain physical evidence for verification procedures concerning implementing partners. Additionally, the external auditor suggested performing cross-check by having both the program manager and the field officer sign the verification report during the actual verification process. With respect to the performance audit on legal aid conducted by the external auditor during 2023, the audit covered administrative processes of legal aid system of the court, indigence assessment, counsel appointment, and budget payment of the legal aid. There have been 10 findings and 10 recommendations, mostly with the perspective of transparency, internal control, effectiveness, and cost efficiency. Regarding the indigence assessment, the external auditor reviewed whether legal aid has been provided in accordance with the ICC's regulations. It was found that, contrary to the regulations, the court was providing legal aid regardless of whether the accused was indigent or not. Furthermore, the court has not made sufficient effort to recover overpaid legal aid fund. while about 2 million euros is still remaining unrecovered. Also, indigent assessment to determine the provision of legal aid were found to be prolonged, with an average of 293 days and a maximum of 1,073 days to reach a conclusion, despite the fact that regulation of the court requires the result of such assessment to be available within 30 days from commencement of assessment, mainly due to non-cooperation from state parties in providing information. Accordingly, the external auditor recommended the court prepare measures to ensure the principle and establish clear administrative procedures and for the indigence assessment. It was also recommended for the court to actively pursue measures to recover overpaid legal aid fund and find ways to further induce cooperation from state parties in the indigence assessment process. The next area that was looked into was transparency and fairness of the council appointment process. It was found that there was insufficient internal control over the process of inclusion in the list of council and for monitoring the availability confirmation of the candidates. Accordingly, the external auditor recommended the court amend related work procedure and implement a monitoring process to ensure transparency and internal control throughout the council appointment process. Lastly, the external auditor looked into whether legal aid payment was transparently managed or not. Although the legal aid budget is allocated to two commitment items referred to as Counsel for Defense and Counsel for Victims, it was found that the court has used some of the victims' budget allotment without transfer procedure to cover defense team costs over the past 5 years. In particular, in relation to the contingency fund for 2020, the court misreported the actual expenditures per commitment item to the CVF and ASP, missing 163,923 euros of victims' legal aid budget, which was actually spent in a way that benefited the defendant. Therefore, the external auditor recommended the court use the due internal process when transferring legal aid budget and to ensure accurate reporting on the actual expenditures of the legal aid budget for defense or victims respectively in the annual report, which is to be submitted to the ASP for legal aid budget transparency. I'd like to conclude by mentioning that it is a great pleasure to present the audit report. The external auditor hopes that these efforts contribute to improving the performance of the court. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cho, for your intervention. I think this is something that will be continued to be discussed in the working group on the program budget this afternoon. I think in all the reports that we've heard today, we've had, I think, a very good introduction to the discussion, which will take place in the working group. And we look forward to the results of those deliberations and to the decisions that will follow to ensure full compliance with the recommendations of the auditors in the case of the audit situation, and also a fulsome discussion on budgets where we will deal with the continuing problem in life, which is that there's always more good ideas than there is money. So that's just the nature of budgetary discussions. We're going to take a brief pause to rearrange people on the podium, and we'll then turn our attention to the consideration of the report of the head of the Independent Oversight Mechanism. I want to thank our guests very much for their due diligence and fulsome help. Thank you.
You said something important.
We have a full morning. If we could take our seats. We're now going to turn to the consideration of the annual report of the head of the Independent Oversight Mechanism. We're going to hear a presentation on the annual report of the head of the IOM, which covers the period from the 1st of October 22 to the 30th of September 23. This report has been issued as Assembly Document ICC-ASP/22/21. We're delighted that we have the head of the Independent Oversight Mechanism, Mr. Saklen Hederali, who's going to introduce the annual report. Mr. Hederali, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. C'est un immense honneur pour moi que de pouvoir présenter à l'Assemblée aujourd'hui le rapport annuel du mécanisme de contrôle indépendant. Mais tout d'abord, j'aimerais remercier la présidence sortante de l'Assemblée pour son appui au mécanisme. Autant ici à New York, sous votre responsabilité, Monsieur le Vice-président, ainsi qu'à La Haye, sous celle de son Excellence Katerina Sequencova. J'aimerais aussi tout particulièrement remercier la présidente de l'Assemblée, Mme Silvia Fernandez de Gourmendi, pour sa disponibilité et son soutien indéfectible au travail du mécanisme, sans jamais toutefois interférer avec le mandat du mécanisme. J'espère que nous jouirons du même soutien de la part de la nouvelle présidence. Mr. Vice President, this is my last session of the Assembly as the head of the IOM. Allow me to also reflect as I go along on these 5 years as the head of the IOM and the evolution of the function since I took office on 1st of November 2018. When I first arrived, the regulatory framework of the court was lacking. Since then, the IOM has supported this Assembly in revising the operational mandate of the IOM in 2020, has been instrumental in assisting the court in adapting its new internal regulations with respect to investigations, disciplinary proceedings, discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment, abuse of authority, and is now finalizing a new whistleblower protection policy and anti-retaliation policy. Together, these new and revised instruments have more fully integrated the IOM in the regulatory framework of the court, making it more robust and, more importantly, more fit for purpose. Some gaps, however, Mr. Vice President, still remain. For instance, the accountability regime for elected officials is still largely untested, and the role of the IOM in this system has recently come under attack. The amendments to Rule 26 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence adopted 5 years ago are now being called into question in some parts. It goes without saying that principle of judicial independence, of prosecutorial independence, form the cornerstone of any effective judicial system based on the rule of law. It is my firm belief, however, that accountability cannot be sacrificed at the altar of independence, allowing it to be abused and used as a shield against allegations of, for instance, fraud, bullying, sexual harassment, or abuse of the great power vested in elected officials. A court designed to combat impunity externally cannot do so credibly if it lacks accountability internally. Excellencies, in addition to investigations of misconduct, accountability is also provided through the IOM's evaluation function, which provides a different type of accountability by focusing on learning and continuous improvement. Despite its modest resources, the IOM has, in the last 5 years, been asked to conduct evaluation of most of the court's major programs. Even more importantly, in that time, the evaluation function of the IOM has gone from being an unknown, often misunderstood function, with some even suggesting its elimination, to now being recognized for the value that it can bring to the court, with requests being made by both state parties and all three organs of the court. Excellencies, in addition to the functions found in the IOM operational mandate, we have also carried some additional ones, most notably providing support in the design and implementation of unprecedented due diligence processes for elections of court officials. In 2021, the IOM designed and implemented the first such process for the election of deputy prosecutors. This was followed the next year by a process for the election of the registrar. And finally, this year, the IOM conducted the first due diligence process for the Assembly's judicial elections, which occurred earlier this week. Each process built upon the previous one. Despite the demands of the limited IOM resources, I was grateful for the trust given to the IOM in these important processes, which now culminated in the proposal before this session of the Assembly for the establishment of a permanent due diligence process. This should not be the end, however, but the beginning. This process will undoubtedly be further refined as we move towards its implementation. But, Mr. Vice President, this due diligence process should also not be viewed as a panacea to address some of the issues plaguing the workplace culture of the court, as identified by the independent expert review, or indeed by the IOM itself in its 2022 evaluation of the workplace culture in the judiciary. There is a gap that remains between the substantive assessment of the qualification and competencies of the candidates that are carried out, for example, by the Advisory Committee on Nominations for Judges, and the due diligence process, which focuses on whether these candidates had engaged in misconduct in the past. I hope that our colleagues from civil society who were instrumental in advocating for the due diligence process will also turn their attention in making sure that these assessments are strengthened to make sure that they take into account leadership skills, management skills, and that the candidates who are nominated share the values of the court. And hopefully this assessment will lead to the election of the most qualified candidates to these important positions. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the IOM is a subsidiary body of the Assembly. But more than that, and despite what some may sometimes think of the court, it is a friend of the court. It is a friend of this Assembly. It is, however, a critical friend, and it must be a critical friend, as this is its statutory role. Like any good friend, it is here to provide open and frank feedback and advice to it, even if this is not what they may want to hear. Like in any friendship, there can be disagreements. And when the advice that is provided by the IOM is not received in the spirit of friendship in which it is given, even if the response at time may even be hostile, this does not deter us. Because our friendship is not to any particular elected official, any particular organ, or any particular delegation. It is to the court, to this Rome Statute system, and to the values that it represents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hederali, for your report. I'd now like to ask if any delegation would like to take the floor at this stage. I see none. Is there one there? No. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to note that this assembly session will be the last for Mr. Hederali in his very important role as the head of the Independent Oversight Mechanism. I want to thank him on behalf of the Assembly for his dedication and his commitment to his role over the past 5 years. I've had the pleasure of working closely with him on some difficult and challenging issues which require good judgment, a great deal of independence, but also a strong understanding of the work that the court does in every respect. I particularly want to thank him for the development of the due diligence processes for elected officials, in addition to the usual and sensitive and heavy workload of the IOM. I listened very carefully to your comments about the need to improve some of the issues of accountability. I hope we will have a further opportunity to discuss those because I think they are critically important. But I do want to express my strong appreciation to you personally for your assistance, for your help, and for your leadership. Je vous remercie beaucoup pour votre leadership, la qualité de votre travail et la contribution énorme que vous avez faite depuis longtemps dans le travail. Et franchement, un processus où nous avons beaucoup amélioré nos processus intérieurs et votre contribution à ce sujet a été très, très importante. Et je vous remercie beaucoup. Thank you all, folks. We're going to take another brief pause as we go into the cooperation plenary. I will talk myself out of a job as the moderator, although I'll be making some comments on the 25th anniversary. But we're now going to turn to the plenary, and we'll bring up our other guests. And merci. Thank you, Saklan. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Oui, je vais commencer et puis je vais commencer en passant à vous. Collègues, bonjour. On va recommencer avec une agenda différent, c'est-à-dire une séance plénière sur la coopération intitulée « Réflexion sur 25 ans de coopération ». Je souhaite rappeler que cette réunion est convoquée conformément à la décision de l'Assemblée prise lors de sa 11e session, par laquelle l'Assemblée a noté avec satisfaction la nécessité d'inscrire la coopération en tant que point permanent à l'ordre du jour des futures sessions de l'Assemblée. L'Assemblée organise cette plénière pour continuer à souligner, sur une base annuelle, l'importance d'une coopération plus efficace des États afin de soutenir la Cour dans l'exercice de son mandat. Je vais participer, mais en même temps, je vous souhaite tous une discussion très productive. Je suis heureux aussi de participer au premier segment de cette session plénière avec mes estimés collègues à la Cour. Je laisse maintenant cette session plénière entre les mains absolument compétentes des co-facilitateurs pour la coopération, c'est-à-dire l'ambassadeur Alabrune et l'ambassadeur Guillet, qui feront quelques remarques introductives pour cette session qui porte sur un sujet d'une importance cruciale pour la réussite des travaux de la Cour. Alors, messieurs.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Vice-président, d'avoir ouvert cette session. Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Monsieur le Vice-président, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le procureur adjoint, Monsieur le greffier de la Cour, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais tout d'abord, en mon nom et au nom de mon collègue, son Excellence l'ambassadeur du Sénégal aux Pays-Bas, Momar Gueye, qui hélas n'a pu être avec nous aujourd'hui et qui est remplacé par l'ambassadeur Diamane Diom à mes côtés, vous souhaitez à toutes et à tous la bienvenue à cette plénière sur la coopération au cours de cette session de l'Assemblée des États parties. Je suis très heureux d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui pour cette plénière. Dans le cadre de cette facilitation que la France et le Sénégal mènent depuis 7 ans. Et c'est pour nous un honneur de contribuer à mobiliser les États et les inciter à coopérer avec la Cour pénale internationale, conformément à nos obligations en tant qu'État partie et d'une manière qui est évidemment indispensable pour la Cour, qui ne peut pas travailler, qui ne peut pas accomplir sa mission sans cette coopération. Et tout particulièrement compte tenu des défis auxquels aujourd'hui elle fait face. Alors notre session comportera 2 segments. Un premier segment qui nous permettra d'entendre un certain nombre d'interventions de responsables de haut niveau qui nous dresseront à la fois un bilan et des perspectives 25 ans après l'adoption du statut. Et je remercie les différentes personnalités qui ont accepté de nous livrer leur point de vue. Et nous entendrons aussi quelques interventions en complément. Et le second segment sera un segment plus technique et pratique, si je puis dire, et qui sera focalisé sur une question d'une grande importance aussi, qui est la question des arrestations. Alors, sans plus attendre, je vais donc ouvrir ce premier segment et donner la parole aux différentes personnalités qui vont intervenir. On va commencer par vous, Monsieur le vice-président de l'Assemblée. Donc, je vous redonne la parole.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. President Obmaski, Deputy Prosecutor Nyang, Registrar, Excellencies, Ambassadors, Co-Chairs, Co-Facilitators for Cooperation. I've been asked to speak on behalf of the President of the ASP on the achievements and perspectives of the Rome Statute in the last 25 years and how we can collectively strengthen and promote cooperation with the International Criminal Court and between states. I think it's important to stress that after the historic adoption of the Rome Statute, which really came in a very particular moment in our history since 1945, because up until the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, it was difficult to imagine our ability to create new breakthroughs for the United Nations and for the world and the global system. And the Rome Statute came within that period of 15 years where we were able to do a lot globally. And I think we all have to recognize that when the Rome Statute was negotiated, when it was signed, there were enormous sort of hopes and expectations as to the era which we would be entering. And of course, we've discovered the challenges that we are now living in a world where atrocities are multiplying and where the hard-won achievements to really assure an order that is based on the rule of law, there are some who would say, well, that's all fading away. We're not living in that world. And sometimes people wonder if it would be possible to create the court today. As interesting as that question might be, I think it's important for us to note what the court has been able to do in some of the most difficult circumstances. Because in fact, the court has consolidated the foundations for a global justice system. It has reaffirmed the obligation to investigate and to prosecute. We find that more and more states are now willing to exercise jurisdiction over international crimes, and initiatives are multiplying to provide justice or to assist those who can do so by establishing mechanisms for the collection and the preservation of evidence. I would point to the fact that we have several mechanisms at work today which are gathering evidence at an unprecedented level and level of detail and level of sophistication of abuses and crimes. I would note Syria, I would note Myanmar as examples where, although there are still no prosecutions before the ICC, that doesn't mean there isn't a very real and deep acceptance of the need to find evidence and to deal with those who've committed terrible crimes. We have better instruments of cooperation to facilitate interstate cooperation for the investigation and prosecution of core crimes. I think it's fair to say that we're seeing the emergence above and beyond the ICC of a global justice ecosystem within which international and national courts clearly have a role to play. And we think that this court and the Assembly must join forces with all those that are involved in justice efforts to help us to consolidate and to improve the system. So, in light of all that we've done, and I've just listed a few, the question is not, would it be possible to create the court today? Rather, the question is, how do we keep on going to strengthen the system? Not to look back on Rome and say, well, what did they imagine would happen? And then say, how terrible it is that we weren't able to do all the things we wanted to. But rather is to understand that we are actually building something, that we are actually part of a broad movement of creating the institutions that are necessary for the establishment of peace and security and justice. And the occasion of this 25th anniversary gives us an opportunity to do that. And we've been doing it. This has been a year of review and really making every effort to think it through. This process began in The Hague. It was followed by a high-level conference here at the UN in New York. We had an important area formula meeting of the Security Council that was organized by Japan and by Switzerland. We also organized a conference in Syracuse in Italy, where the president of the court was able to go. For some reason, my invitation got lost in the mail somewhere, but Sylvia was able to be there. Civil society and academia were there to reflecting together on how to ensure consistent, sustainable support for the court in the coming decade. And this meeting is yet another opportunity for states parties to reflect seriously, not only on what we have done, but what we have not been able to do and how we could, in fact, improve it. And I think the activities this year have really allowed us to reaffirm our commitment to the rule of law, to the principle of accountability in the present circumstances. When important values underlying the court are put into question and there is a risk of their being undermined by direct and indirect attacks against its court, its officials, and its staff, as well as others cooperating with it. And so I have another question for you. If the court was irrelevant, why would it be under such attack? And it's not a totally rhetorical question. The reality is the court is under attack, quite systematic attack on its ability to do its job. Attempts to create fear among prosecutors, fear among judges, attempts to destroy the IT infrastructure of the court. Why would that be happening? Because the court is doing its job. Because the court it's certainly relevant to those people who are being made uncomfortable. And so we need to understand its value as we address these challenges and stand together to deal with the problem. The first point I want to make in conclusion is the court can't work in isolation. It needs political support. It needs the support of states parties. It needs a steady commitment on the financial side. We also need to continue our efforts to promote the universality and the full implementation of the Rome Statute. And we have to ensure that states parties have the effective legislation that they need in order to be able to carry out and assist the court in all of its work. In other words, we need to strengthen the domestic role that states parties must play in order to give complementarity its full sway. So that, I think, is some of the reflections that we need to think about as we go forward. And I think it's important for us to recognize that from my perspective and from the perspective of the presidency, it is not a glass that is half empty, it is a glass that is half full. And we have to continue to reflect on how we can do a better job for victims, how we can do a better job for survivors, how we can do a better job to deal with this very difficult issue of impunity, and how we have to recognize that the court cannot be alone in doing this. It needs the work of states parties to make it the effective instrument that we believe it should be. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Vice-président, pour cette présentation très percutante et très forte. Je donne maintenant la parole au président de la Cour, Monsieur le Président Foumanski. Vous avez la parole.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by thanking France and Senegal for the excellent work, co-facilitators on cooperation already for several years. This work is much appreciated by the court. Thank you. As you know, the cooperation is one of the most fundamental elements of the Rome Statute system. The drafters of the statutes created a judicial pillar consisting of the court and an enforcement pillar consisting of states. Cooperation of the latter with the former is critical for the system to function as intended. And as you all know, full cooperation with the court's investigation and prosecutions is a legal obligation of the state parties in accordance with Article 86 of the Rome Statute and other relevant provisions of the statute. And if we consider cooperation in a broader sense, it also includes the political and the diplomatic support for the court. That support is necessary, but to protect the court against attempts to undermine its work and to expand the community of states committed to the ICC's mandate. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as I understand as I underlined in my opening remarks on Monday, it is important that the support and cooperation of states is not made conditional upon the court acting in a specific way in the matters that fall under judicial prosecutorial independence. Indeed, support for the court should be support for the institution and all its activities as a whole. States should extend their full cooperation for the court's operation, even when these may not fully align with the state's national interests. This is really essential for strengthening the rule of law at the international level. For full cooperation to be possible, it is vital that the state parties domesticate the Rome Statute cooperation provisions, adopting national procedures for all forms of cooperation foreseen in the statute. I find it regrettable that almost half of the state parties have not yet done that or not done it fully. I am of course aware that the legislative agenda of many states is very busy with competing priorities, but I think on this as a long-term investment. The ICC is a permanent institution, and it is in our interests to put in place a solid legal framework to make sure you can comply swiftly and fully with your obligations toward the court whenever the issue may arise. I also call upon all states to ratify and implement of the agreement on the privileges and the immunities of the court. This is critical for the ability of the court personnel, including counsel, to conduct official missions in a safe manner and without fear of interference with their independent functions. The importance of all state parties joining this agreement is further underlined in light of the recent threats and attacks against the court. The security of court officials and staff must be taken seriously, and the APIC, which complements Article 48 of the Rome Statute, is a key tool in that respect. As such, I must express my concern about the fact that 45 state parties are yet to join APIC, and I urge them to do so without delay. Finally, I would like to appeal to all states parties to conclude cooperation agreements with the ICC on the relocation of witnesses, enforcement of sentences, the temporary release of persons, and the final release of persons. All these forms of cooperation are truly critical for the court's operations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by thanking all states and organizations that extend vitally important cooperation and assist the ICC. Many countries in particular have invested extensive efforts in enabling the court to conduct its operation on their territory years after year. This is very highly appreciated. And as I said earlier, justice is a team effort. Together, we can achieve our goals. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je donne maintenant la parole au procureur adjoint, Monsieur Mamandiaï Nyang. Vous avez la parole, Monsieur.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs. Donc, c'est avec honneur et humilité que, une fois encore, je vous rejoins sur ce podium, comme l'année dernière, pour représenter le bureau du procureur, surtout pour parler aussi de ce thème essentiel qu'est la coopération. Je ne peux qu'être absolument d'accord avec ce que M. le vice-président Ray a indiqué quand il a dit que la Cour ne peut pas travailler en isolation. Je viens de finir une petite tournée en Afrique où j'ai eu effectivement à le rappeler parce que j'avais vu une telle attente, comme vous l'avez dit, Monsieur le Président, il y a une telle attente de justice dans beaucoup de ces pays qui parfois ont tenté et ont atteint leurs limites. Et je me suis trouvé interpellé plus d'une fois, disant voilà, dans le cœur de votre statut, vous dites que si nous ne sommes pas capables, vous êtes là. Et alors nous vous tendons la main, faites-le. Tout en ne rejetant pas cet appel, parce qu'effectivement, ce qu'il dit, c'est vrai. Je n'ai pas manqué aussi de le rappeler que ce géant que vous regardez avec tellement d'attente aussi est un géant malheureusement dépourvu de membres, et ces membres, c'est vous. Pour autant que je vous promette que nous allons regarder ensemble avec vous ce que nous pouvons faire en tant que Cour, mais ne soyez pas étonnés qu'on vous revienne aussi pour vous demander votre coopération, parce que nous n'avons pas de police, en fait. Nous n'avons pas, en fait, ce à quoi souvent il est fait référence comme law enforcement, qui est le bras de la justice. Nous en sommes dépourvus et effectivement, c'est aux États de nous aider à pouvoir être fonctionnels. Donc à ce titre, je crois que la coopération, je ne dirais même pas que la coopération a un rôle essentiel. Notre justice, c'est vraiment, elle se résume, elle se réduit à la coopération. Sans la coopération, nous ne pouvons rien faire. Bon, bien entendu, comme il a été indiqué, et le président Hofmanski l'a rappelé, dans le statut, déjà, nous avons suffisamment de bases juridiques pour que les États membres, et parfois même au-delà, puissent trouver une assise normale pour pouvoir coopérer. Mais depuis un certain temps, nous nous efforçons aussi de consolider cette base en voyant dans le détail comment est-ce qu'on peut faire avec les États. Ça a été la politique du procureur Khan. Vous regardez en Amérique latine, au Venezuela, en Colombie, chaque fois qu'il y a maintenant un mécanisme qui est en cours, nous essayons par un mémorandum d'entente d'en donner une base juridique qui entre dans le détail. Et ce qui est le plus intéressant aussi dans cette démarche, c'est surtout que ça soit une démarche à deux sens. Dans un sens, nous nous appuyons sur l'État pour faire nos enquêtes et tout le reste, mais en même temps aussi, ce que ces États ne peuvent pas faire, mais qu'ils essaient de faire au titre de la complémentarité, notre nouvelle démarche nous permet de ne plus voir cette alternative presque mécanique, en disant ces États ne sont pas capables de le faire, eh bien nous le faisons. Donc, la coopération et la complémentarité vont maintenant de pair dans la vision de notre bureau. Malgré les difficultés, nous essayons de voir à travers justement la coopération comment nous pouvons avec l'assistance technique, avec le renforcement de capacité, comment en fait renforcer les moyens domestiques pour que cette justice, qui est un attribut de la souveraineté, continue à fonctionner à travers ces mémorandums d'entente que nous avons signés également récemment en République démocratique du Congo, que nous avons signés en République centrafricaine, notamment quand le procureur a décidé qu'il n'allait plus ouvrir de nouvelles affaires et que nous continuerons à travers les affaires qui nous restent, nous continuons à nous appuyer sur l'État, mais que maintenant, pour le reste, nous le laissons aux États tout en essayant de mettre à leur disposition nos moyens techniques pour les renforcer à continuer. Et nous avons à ce titre signé aussi un mémorandum d'entente avec la Cour pénale spéciale qui, sur beaucoup d'éléments maintenant, compte sur nous, y compris par rapport à l'exploitation des preuves. Donc, il y a toute une panoplie. Et même toujours au titre de la complémentarité, nous sommes engagés avec d'autres États, un peu comme le Nigeria également, pour avoir cette même démarche qui permettra de donner encore plus d'espace à la complémentarité, mais dans le cadre aussi de cette coopération bien sensée. Toujours organisée à cela. Ça nous permet aussi maintenant d'avoir une assise et un lien plus solide aussi avec la société civile. Donc, qui n'a pas cet attribut de souveraineté, mais dont tout le monde sait qu'elle joue un rôle essentiel dans les fonctions de la Cour. Donc, voilà tout un ensemble de choses que nous essayons de faire maintenant à travers ces mémorandums d'entente que nous signons avec tous ces États-là, donc, et qui permet vraiment de renforcer le lien entre le bureau du procureur, donc je dirais même entre la Cour vraiment et les États au titre de la coopération. Voilà en quelques mots ce que je souhaitais dire, en espérant peut-être que pour ce qui concerne les mandats d'arrêt aussi, peut-être que j'aurai l'occasion de placer un mot ou deux. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
C'est moi qui vous remercie, Monsieur le procureur adjoint. Et je donne maintenant la parole au greffier de la Cour, Monsieur Osvaldo Riller. Vous avez la parole pour 5 minutes. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, Excellences, distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi de m'adresser à vous aujourd'hui dans le cadre de cette séance plénière. Telle que traditionnellement présentée, la coopération incarnée est l'une des deux piliers principaux de la Cour. Et elle constitue également une fonction majeure du greffe, ce qui est parfois moins connu. À titre d'exemple, entre septembre 2022 et septembre 2023, 300 demandes d'assistance ont été envoyées par le greffe. Ce qui n'apparaît pas clairement à travers de ces chiffres, c'est que chaque demande n'est que le début d'un dialogue avec l'État requis et que leur mise en œuvre complète nécessité de l'expertise, des ressources et un engagement soutenu de la part de la Cour. Par ailleurs, nous devons aussi prendre en compte les nouveaux paramètres avec lesquels la Cour travaille et qui auront un impact sur la coopération. Je parle ici de l'expansion des zones géographiques dans lesquelles nous opérons, qui va obliger à nous équiper à se familiariser avec des régimes juridiques très différents. Je fais également référence aux nouvelles menaces auxquelles la Cour est confrontée et au déploiement de nos activités dans les zones de guerre. Ceci conduit la Cour à solliciter de nouveaux types de coopération liés à des impératifs de sécurité. À titre d'exemple, la France nous assiste en accueillant notre personnel médical dans les formations dispensées par le ministère des Armées, et la Belgique a accepté de nous assister en relation avec le stockage de certaines armes sur son territoire. Je suis au même titre conscient des changements fondamentaux s'opérant au sein des relations internationales et de la nécessité pour la Cour d'être mieux équipée pour comprendre le contexte dans lequel la coopération des États est sollicitée. Un autre aspect à prendre en considération est que soutenir la coopération judiciaire du greffe renforce la coopération judiciaire au sein de la Cour dans son ensemble. En effet, le greffe met ses ressources de coopération judiciaire et son expertise à disposition des chambres et de la présidence dans le cadre de l'exécution des demandes de gel des avoirs, par exemple. Il travaille également en collaboration avec le bureau du procureur sur des projets communs nécessitant l'appui des États et soutient les conseils et transmettant leurs demandes de coopération, notamment dans le cadre de leur travail d'enquête. Ambassador, the responsibilities in terms of cooperation are therefore important, diverse, and increasingly complex. Having this in mind, I am creating within the registry a new section, the Judicial Cooperation Support Section, or the JCSS, with the responsibility of centralizing all the aforementioned functions and giving our cooperation experts the best possible platform to deliver results. The establishment of the section will empower and enable the registry to deliver on its mandate more effectively at the strategic and operational levels. The JCSS will be constituted as of next year with the aim of fully operationalizing through key recruitments by the middle of the year. Now, one of the 2 units in these sections will be devoted to the arrest and surrender of suspects at large. The experience of 17 arrest operations has taught us that implementation of requests for arrest and surrender need close follow-up by the court. Partnerships must be created with the national authorities in charge in order not only to take advantage of all opportunities that present themselves to arrest fugitives, but also to proactively create those opportunities. I will summarize a few of the lessons we have learned over the years and which will inform the cooperation strategies that the registry will pursue under my leadership. We have invested time and resources to developing close relationships with national focal points within the central administrations of key cooperation partners. These relationships have allowed us to develop mutually better understanding of the challenges that both the court and the states face in implementing requests for cooperations and have paid dividends in us finding practical solutions to overcome various problems. I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to our focal points for their assistance, for their constructive engagement and commitment for our common cause. While practical solutions and good communication are essential ingredients for effective cooperation, much will always depend on having the appropriate legal framework in place to allow national authorities to execute the court's cooperation requests. As such, I wish to stress again today the importance of robust implementing legislation that facilitates cooperation with the court. We will continue to liaise closely with states to understand national requirements so that our requests can be adapted accordingly and the processes be made efficient as possible. We must also pay due regard to what is often termed voluntary cooperation. That is, forms of cooperation that fall outside of Part 9 of the Rome Statute, but which are essential for the effective functioning of the court. Experience has shown that the relocation of witnesses and the implementation of interim release and release for defendants has proven to be a challenge. Finding workable solutions requires solid partnerships, as well as sustained multilateral attention from all parties involved. The registry will continue to engage with states to develop options on filling these systemic gaps in a structured manner. The court must continue to strengthen our cooperation with international and regional organizations. I would like to thank the United Nations for its constant support to the court. I also value our constructive interactions with the European Union and the African Union. And I am looking forward to engaging with new partners and developing more specialized relationships in Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. The occasion of the 25th anniversary of the Rome Statute is a natural time for reflection. And one of the main takeaways for me is the continuing need for audacity and resilience. We need to be audacious in order to innovate and rethink cooperation so that it is fit to face the challenges that the new global realities throw our way. But we need to also be resilient in order to survive attacks and not allow anything to distract our focus from serving the cause of justice. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le greffier. L'importance de la coopération a bien été rappelée, illustrée par les différentes interventions. Je remercie à nouveau les orateurs que nous venons d'entendre. Et parmi les instruments importants de cette coopération, il y a les accords de coopération volontaires que nous encourageons, bien sûr, les États parties à signer. Et nous avons la possibilité aujourd'hui d'entendre sur ce sujet nos collègues belges qui vont intervenir sur ce sujet et à partir de leur propre expérience. Je voudrais donc donner la parole à la délégation belge. Monsieur l'ambassadeur, vous avez la parole pour 5 minutes. Merci.
Merci aux co-facilitateurs pour organiser cette réunion. Merci de nous accorder la parole. Et avant tout, je tiens à remercier Madame la Présidente de l'Assemblée ainsi que les hauts représentants de la Cour que nous venons d'écouter pour leur déclaration très instructive pour tous, je crois. Comme cela a été souligné, la coopération est une responsabilité partagée des États parties et elle est fondamentale. Elle est fondamentale pour permettre à la Cour d'atteindre les objectifs qui lui sont assignés. Dans un certain nombre de cas, la coopération des États parties est rendue obligatoire par le système du statut de Rome. Mais d'autres formes de coopération que l'on pourrait qualifier de coopération volontaire ne sont pas formellement imposées, mais sont néanmoins essentielles pour permettre à la Cour de remplir ses missions. C'est pourquoi, et c'est dans cet état d'esprit que la Belgique a conclu plusieurs accords de coopération dans ces domaines. Et je vais citer quelques exemples. Nous avons un accord sur la réinstallation de témoins protégés ou de victimes. Nous avons signé un accord sur l'exécution des peines, un accord sur la libération provisoire et un nouvel accord cadre sur la mise en liberté des personnes que la Belgique et le greffe ont signé le 7 juillet dernier à l'occasion des cérémonies du 25e anniversaire du statut de Rome. Permettez-moi de vous dire quelques mots au sujet de ce dernier accord. Nous savons bien que la Cour n'a pas de territoire sur lequel les suspects ou les détenus pourraient être libérés lorsque la Cour a ordonné leur libération provisoire, lorsqu'ils ont été définitivement acquittés ou après avoir purgé leur peine. Pourtant, sans la coopération des États, ces personnes devraient rester indûment sous le contrôle de la Cour. Les États parties doivent cependant et donc assumer de prendre en charge une prise en charge équitable. Et il est important de souligner que l'accord entre la Belgique et la Cour sur la mise en liberté des personnes n'implique pas de nouvelles obligations de coopérer. Les demandes de la Cour dans ce cadre sont examinées au cas par cas. Mais cet accord est cependant essentiel parce qu'il permet à la Cour d'identifier un État disponible pour cet aspect des procédures et qu'il favorise un traitement efficace des demandes en réglant à l'avance les questions juridiques et pratiques pertinentes. C'est un point qui a été souligné par les orateurs. Force de son expérience, la Belgique souhaite une fois encore encourager les États parties à prendre toutes les dispositions nécessaires pour coopérer le plus largement possible avec la Cour, notamment par la conclusion d'accords de coopération. Et pour finir, je voudrais saisir cette occasion et l'occasion de cette intervention pour vous confirmer, comme d'ailleurs l'a souligné Monsieur le greffier, que la Belgique est très honorée d'avoir signé ce jeudi 7 décembre 2023 un 10e accord de coopération renforcée avec la Cour qui concerne ici le stockage d'armes et l'utilisation d'infrastructures d'entraînement pour le personnel de sécurité de la Cour dans les environnements à haut risque. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, pour cette présentation qui illustre bien l'importance de la signature de ce type d'accord. Je me permets d'ajouter que l'accord entre la France et la Cour pénale internationale sur l'exécution des peines, signé en 2021, est entré en vigueur le 17 juillet dernier. Je vais maintenant passer la parole aux États parties et autres participants qui se sont inscrits pour prendre la parole en insistant sur l'importance de bien maîtriser le temps de parole de chacun conformément afin que nous puissions tenir notre session dans les délais prescrits. Je donne la parole tout d'abord à la délégation du Costa Rica au nom d'un groupe d'États partis.
Buenas tardes. Honorable President of the Court, Mr. Deputy Prosecutor, Mr. Registrar, Excellency, Mr. Vice President of the Bureau, co-facilitators, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the following 47 state parties: Afghanistan, Albania, Argentina, Bangladesh, Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Chile, Cyprus, Denmark, Dominican Republic, Estonia, Finland, Germany, Guatemala, Greece, Honduras, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Jordan, Latvia, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Madagascar, Moldova, the Netherlands, North Macedonia, Norway, Portugal, Poland, Romania, Sierra Leone, Samoa, South Africa, Slovakia, Slovenia, Sweden, Switzerland, Tunisia, Uganda, Vanuatu, Zambia, and my own country, Costa Rica. Ongoing conflicts and crises around the globe where serious international crimes might have been committed highlight the critical role of the ICC. Regrettably, the court is needed more than we could have imagined 25 years ago. Last year, the Assembly, and I quote, reaffirmed its support for the consistent implementation of the court's mandate across the situations and cases under its jurisdiction in the interest of justice and the victims' rights of access to justice, and stressed the need for sustainable resources for all situations and cases, as well as cooperation with the court to that end. End of quote. To ensure that we live up to the challenges of today and the legitimate expectation of victims and affected communities, we must put those words into practice by providing the court the political, operational, and financial support it needs. As Assembly, we must support the work of the court across each and all situations before it. All victims deserve equal access to justice. We must work together to protect the court's judicial and prosecutorial independence. And we should together decisively reject threats aimed at the court and those cooperating with it, including civil society. While ensuring the court must exercise a sound management of its resources, the ICC must be provided with the required financial capacity to fulfill its mandate. We must be ready to invest in justice. Cooperation with the court makes justice possible. We celebrate the first case completed in full, which was made possible by cooperation. Our governments recall that this court was created for present and future generations. Let's continue working together to ensure accountability for the most serious crimes of international concern and provide justice to its victims today and in the future. I thank you.
Merci, Madame l'ambassadeur. Je donne maintenant la parole à la délégation de l'Argentine en priant l'orateur de ne pas dépasser 2 minutes. Merci.
Buenos días a todos, señor presidente de la Corte, señor fiscal adjunto, señor secretario, señor vicepresidente, cofacilitadores, excelencias y estimados colegas. En primer lugar, quiero aclarar que la Argentina siempre se dirige en español en este plenario porque somos firmes defensores del multilingüismo en la Corte como una muestra de inclusividad. Pero al mismo tiempo me toca hablar por un grupo de países, así que me disculpo por eso y voy a continuar en inglés. It is my privilege to stand here today on behalf of the core group of the MLA initiative, consisting of Argentina, Belgium, Mongolia, the Netherlands, Senegal, and Slovenia. As some of you might know, last May, the Ljubljana, the Hague Convention on the Investigation and Prosecution of the Crime of Genocide, Crimes Against Humanity, War Crimes, and Other International Crimes was adopted by consensus. The negotiations took place in Ljubljana, and 68 states, as well as 7 international organizations and 11 civil society organizations, participated therein. The Ljubljana, the Hague Convention, aims to provide national authorities with a modern legal framework to cooperate with one another in the investigation and prosecution of core international crimes. As such, it touches upon many of the issues that are also dealt with in the Hague Working Group on Cooperation, but on the horizontal rather than the vertical level. Although the convention was adopted outside the ICC framework, the commonalities are numerous. By enhancing domestic adjudication, it makes the principle of complementarity more effective. The Convention uses the Rome Statute definitions of crimes, and both the Rome Statute and the Convention aim to end impunity for the most serious international crimes. On the 14th and 15th of February 2024, the signing conference for the Convention will take place in The Hague. It goes without saying that we hope to welcome many of you there and call upon all states to consider becoming a party to this important convention. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Lucero. Je donne maintenant la parole à la délégation du Royaume-Uni pour 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ambassador, for giving me the floor. On behalf of the United Kingdom, I would like to thank the co-facilitators for cooperation, Ambassador François Alabrun of France and Ambassador Momar Gueye of Senegal, for their excellent work on this important topic this year. International cooperation is absolutely essential to ensure that the ICC can carry out its mandate in full. When the Rome Statute was adopted 25 years ago, it was well understood that its ability to operate would be dependent on cooperation from states parties. With no police force of its own and no prison, the court relies on the national law enforcement authorities of states parties to arrest individuals, provide protection to witnesses, and enforce sentences. These are fundamental functions which allow the court to conduct its proceedings effectively. Without this cooperation, there will be no trials and no effective sentences. The duty falls on all states parties, but unfortunately, the burden is falling on too few states. There are 124 states parties, but this number has not been mirrored in the ratification of agreements on cooperation. The calls of states parties on the court to do more and to do it faster are not mirrored by efforts to take the practical steps needed to help the court. The reality is that too few states parties have agreements to provide the cooperation the court needs. The court is currently dealing with a high number of situations, vulnerable witnesses and arrest warrants, and the need for greater cooperation is becoming urgent. There will be further need for states to help with sentence enforcement if, as we hope, the court is successful in securing more convictions. The United Kingdom is party to all of the main cooperation agreements and has established procedures to respond to requests for assistance, closely working with the cooperation staff at the court. We are happy to share our experience of doing so. Today, the court operates in an increasingly hostile environment, as evidenced by the recent cyber attack and Russian coercive measures against the court officials. Now more than ever, in the face of these attacks, strong political and diplomatic support for the court by states parties is a crucial form of cooperation. But while words of support are important, practical measures to back up these statements are needed even more. The United Kingdom stands ready, as it always has, to share that responsibility. I thank you.
Merci, Madame. Je donne maintenant la parole à la délégation des Pays-Bas pour 2 minutes.
Merci pour la parole. The Netherlands would like to thank the co-facilitators for their continued efforts on this important issue. Cooperation is a fundamental aspect of our day-to-day work as the host state of the court. This cooperation ranges from security and the protection of the court's premises, officials and witnesses, to facilitating the entry of all those who need to be present at the court and the transportation of suspects. We take pride in this work as it allows the court to fulfill its important mandate. The need for cooperation with the court has perhaps never been so crucial as it is today. We have all witnessed that the court and its staff have become objects of external attacks which try to threaten the work of the court. Cooperation is a cornerstone for the proper functioning of the court. It is our common responsibility, in light of these threats, to reiterate our full commitment to ensure the court can effectively and efficiently fulfill its mandate. For the relocation of witnesses, the enforcement of sentences, and the release of persons either on an interim or permanent basis, the court depends on voluntary cooperation of all state parties. Unfortunately, we have witnessed that voluntary cooperation is extremely difficult to secure for the court, making that suboptimal and temporary solutions have to be found that are often also quite costly. In order for the court to function optimally, state parties should be vigilant that the burden of cooperation is shared by all state parties and not just a handful. It should therefore be stressed that voluntary cooperation agreements provide a general framework that allow the states considerable flexibility to grant or refuse cooperation in a specific case. The Netherlands feels compelled to advocate that all state parties strongly consider concluding such agreements. If more states do so, the court will not have to over-ask those states that have concluded these agreements and is provided with the tools to efficiently and effectively fulfill its mandate. The Netherlands hopes that the cooperation with the court will continue to strengthen. The Netherlands also wishes to commend those states that have entered into new agreements over the past year. In conclusion, we wish to stress the importance of cooperation in the battle against all international crimes. And in this regard, we hope to see you at the side event on the new Ljubljana, the Hague Convention on Interstate Cooperation for the National Adjudication on Core Crimes on Monday. Thank you.
Merci, Madame. Je donne maintenant la parole à la délégation du Japon. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ambassador Bloom, for steering discussion on cooperation. Given the increasing number of situations and cases handled by the ICC, cooperation has been more critical than ever for sustainable operation of the court. Against this background, while promotion of voluntary cooperation agreement is essential components of cooperation, we believe that enhancing the capacity of states, in particular capacity of developing states in the field of criminal justice, is also a crucial element of cooperation. During President Hochmansky's visit to Japan in October last year, the ICC signed a cooperation agreement with UNAFE, the United Nations Asia and Far East Institute for the Prevention of Crime and the Treatment of Offenders, whose costs and personnel are fully covered by the government of Japan. And based on this agreement, UNAFE organizes, conducts capacity building activities for the criminal justice personnel from developing countries all over the world with participation of ICC officials. This year, UNAFE invited Vice President Judge Mindua to give a lecture on the role of the ICC and crimes against children in January. Judge Aitara also delivered a lecture online on the transnational organized crimes and the role of the ICC in a UNAFE training course in May. UNAFE will continue to organize these activities in 2024 and beyond. The government of Japan encourages developing partners to make the best use of UNAFE's programs. Japan will continue to strive to enhance cooperation provided for in the Roma Statute. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. Je donne maintenant la parole au représentant de la coalition pour la Cour pénale internationale. Vous avez la parole pour 2 minutes.
Excellencies, over the past 25 years, civil society organizations and human rights defenders have been on the front lines of the efforts to ensure justice for victims and serious international crimes. They do so at great risk. Many human rights defenders and their families in the ICC country situation face harassment, pressure, intimidation, and even criminalization in efforts to silence them and stop their work on behalf of victims, and in turn undermine the ICC implementation of its mandate. The Assembly Presidency has been vocal in condemning attacks on the court and its official aim at undermining the ICC mandate, making use of the Assembly strategy adopted last year to respond to threats and attacks against the court, its officials, and those cooperating with it. This strong show of support for the court from its state parties is crucial. This vocal support should also be extended to those civil society cooperating with the court. We urge state parties make full use of the Assembly strategy to defend and condemn threats and attacks against civil society organizations and human rights defenders who are targeted for their work to advance justice in the Rome Statute system and take a step to strengthen national framework for the protection of human rights defenders. This year, the Assembly Presidency took another step forward by producing a set of guidelines which has been adopted by the Bureau to ensure that human rights defenders can engage with the Assembly safely. We thank President Fernández de Gurmendi for her leadership on this important issue, and we look forward to working with the incoming Assembly Presidency and Bureau to continue this essential discussion, including on implementation of the guidelines with genuine and accessible consultation with those most concerned. The coalition stand ready to engage. Thank you.
Merci, madame. Et maintenant, je passe le relais à l'ambassadeur Diaman Diom du Sénégal, qui va assurer la suite de notre discussion.
Merci, monsieur le co-facilitateur, monsieur le vice-président de l'Assemblée des États partis, monsieur le président de la Cour pénale internationale, monsieur le procureur adjoint, monsieur le greffier, Excellences, mesdames, messieurs, au terme de notre premier segment, je voudrais adresser mes salutations distinguées ainsi que ma gratitude aux chefs des organes de la Cour, qui ont bien voulu prendre part à ce segment de haut niveau en nous faisant part avec éloquence et générosité de leurs réflexions et analyses sur le premier point de notre programme du jour intitulé « 25 ans du statut de Rome, réalisation et perspective ». Ces observations particulièrement pertinentes et utiles sont le fruit d'une expérience éprouvée de la Cour. Son évolution, ses réalisations, mais aussi traduisent la conscience des nombreux défis qu'il nous faut surmonter de manière collective. Je remercie aussi toutes les délégations gouvernementales et celles de la société civile qui portent toujours un grand intérêt aux problématiques relatives à la coopération et à la réflexion sur les axes d'amélioration qu'il conviendrait de mettre en œuvre en la matière. Le caractère essentiel de la coopération en tant qu'un des piliers les plus importants du statut de Rome a été rappelé au cours des discussions. Autrement dit, l'efficacité de cette institution que nous avons mise sur pied est dans une large mesure tributaire de l'efficacité de la coopération dont elle bénéficie de la part des États membres et même des États non membres, mais aussi des organisations internationales, régionales et sous-régionales. En tout état de cause, des efforts ont été accomplis par les partenaires de la Cour, notamment dans le domaine des enquêtes financières, la localisation et le gel des avoirs, la collecte de preuves, la protection des témoins, ainsi qu'en matière de conclusion d'accords de coopération volontaire. Néanmoins, l'ambition de placer la Cour dans les conditions optimales de réussite nous incite à prendre les dispositions appropriées en vue d'élargir et de renforcer cet engagement, ce qui permettra, in fine, de réaliser de manière durable les objectifs du statut de Rome en matière de lutte contre l'impunité des auteurs de crimes internationaux. Ces observations que je viens de formuler mettent ainsi un terme au premier segment de la présente plénière. La seconde, comme l'a fait noter M. l'ambassadeur co-facilitateur, porte sur un panel plus technique et qui portera sur l'une des priorités de la Cour, à savoir les arrestations. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'ambassadeur. Nous avons donc maintenant, nous arrivons au terme de ce premier segment. Je remercie les panélistes qui nous ont honorés de leur présence et nous allons maintenant passer au deuxième segment. Et nous avons sur le sujet des arrestations, qui est une question essentielle.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. À la tenue du procès, nous avons la chance de pouvoir entendre, au titre de ce segment, Monsieur le ministre d'État chargé de la justice de la République centrafricaine, son Excellence Arnaud Joubaï Abazen, que je remercie tout particulièrement de sa présence. Nous avons également Monsieur Racine Ly, conseiller spécial du procureur, Monsieur Tuoma Salminet, coordonnateur des affaires extérieures au sein du greffe, Madame Kate Orlovsky, directrice du programme de la Cour, du programme CPI et droit international pénal de l'International Bar Association. Donc sans plus tarder, je voudrais vous donner la parole, Monsieur le ministre.
Merci, messieurs les facilitateurs et co-facilitateurs. J'ai l'honneur, une fois de plus, de prendre la parole au cours de ce deuxième segment des travaux de notre session de l'Assemblée générale des États parties du statut de Rome pour parler de l'expérience de la République centrafricaine au sujet des arrestations et exécutions de mandats d'arrêt émis par la Cour pénale internationale. Je voudrais réitérer que la justice pénale internationale, sinon la Cour pénale internationale, est fondée sur la coopération des États. Pour la Cour pénale internationale, il s'agit de la coopération entre les États parties
et la coopération avec la Cour elle-même. C'est extrêmement indispensable pour la réussite de la mission assignée à cette juridiction pénale internationale. En ce qui concerne mon pays, la République centrafricaine, en 2010, le gouvernement a domestiqué les crimes internationaux et les procédures de coopération avec la Cour pénale internationale dans son dispositif juridique interne, notamment le Code pénal, le Code de procédure pénale. La RCA a saisi la Cour pénale internationale sur plusieurs cas. Et dans le cadre de l'exécution des mandats d'arrêt émis par la Cour pénale internationale, elle a étroitement collaboré avec la CPI et également avec les États suivants qui ont eu à exécuter les mandats, notamment le Royaume de Belgique, qui a eu à exécuter le premier mandat émis par la Cour pénale internationale dans le cadre de cas soumis par la République centrafricaine. La République du Tchad également a procédé à l'exécution des mandats d'arrêt. La République française, la République de l'Ouganda et notre pays, mon pays, la République centrafricaine, qui a eu à déférer au mandat émis par la Cour pénale internationale. L'exécution de ces mandats d'arrêt traduit la volonté politique réelle du gouvernement de respecter ses engagements en matière de lutte contre les graves violations des droits de l'homme et du droit international humanitaire. Il convient de préciser que l'exécution des mandats d'arrêt émis par la Cour pénale internationale tient dûment compte des fondements juridiques, des preuves suffisantes contre les suspects et obéit aux règles accrues de confidentialité. Le professionnalisme des acteurs, les moyens logistiques et matériels sont les éléments clés du succès de l'exécution des mandats d'arrêt émis par la Cour pénale internationale. Cependant, malheureusement, les défis ne manquent jamais. Nous allons citer entre autres de la réticence de certains États qui s'est traduit par le manque de volonté politique, les moyens limités, les problèmes de sécurité, la porosité des frontières, la problématique de la localisation et l'identification des suspects constituent autant des difficultés, sinon des défis à l'exécution de mandats d'arrêt émis par la Cour pénale internationale. Pour la fluidité de la coopération avec la CPI, la République centrafricaine, en collaboration avec la Cour, a institué les points focaux destinés à faciliter la coopération avec la Cour pénale internationale. La coopération concerne à la fois l'exécution des mandats et les échanges d'informations dont la mise en œuvre des principes de coopération et de complémentarité afin de répartir les compétences entre la Cour pénale internationale, la Cour pénale spéciale et les juridictions pénales nationales compétentes pour commettre de ces crimes. C'est dans le cadre de renforcement de la coopération que le gouvernement centrafricain et la Cour pénale internationale ont signé respectivement des mémorandums d'entente avec le bureau du procureur dans le cadre de la coopération avec le gouvernement centrafricain et l'autre mémorandum avec la Cour pénale spéciale pour permettre de mener à jamais la lutte contre l'impunité pour des violations graves des crimes relevant du statut de Rome. Sur la base de cette expérience centrafricaine, j'invite ardemment tous les États partis au statut de Rome de faire de la coopération la clé de voûte de la réussite de la justice pénale internationale en collaboration étroite avec les États. L'efficacité, la crédibilité de la Cour en dépendent énormément. Je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention, pour les échanges sur l'exemple centrafricain de l'exécution des mandats de la Cour pénale internationale. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le ministre. Nous sommes très, très reconnaissants d'avoir partagé avec nous cette expérience sur cette thématique essentielle. Et je donne maintenant la parole au conseiller spécial du procureur de la Cour, Monsieur Racine-Ly.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, Mesdames et Messieurs. C'est un honneur et un plaisir de participer à ce panel technique. Comme son nom l'indique, nous allons essayer de donner quelques exemples pratiques de ce qui se passe. Dans votre concept note, vous nous demandez de faire le bilan des arrestations et de dégager une perspective. Je vais essayer de partir de ce qui a été fait en termes d'arrestation et sur la base de cela, dégager une perspective qui sera une perspective plus spécifique au bureau du procureur, étant entendu que mon collègue Thomas qui est là pourra certainement aussi donner la perspective du greffe. Alors, pour ce qui est du bilan, il faut d'abord reconnaître que la question de l'arrestation des fugitives reste complexe et qu'elle est aussi tributaire de la conjonction de deux éléments principaux. Les ressources propres à la juridiction, donc à la Cour, mais également l'appui politique dont la Cour bénéficie de la part des États. Cela ressort déjà du rapport sur les stratégies d'arrestation de 2014 et aussi sur le rapport de l'examen de la Cour que nous appelons communément le AIA Report. Par la combinaison de ces deux éléments, nous avons pu parvenir à des arrestations que je vais essayer de regrouper en 3 points pour illustrer. Nous avons d'abord les transferts à la Cour de suspects qui étaient détenus par des juridictions, par les autorités nationales. Si ce premier point, vous avez notamment en termes illustratifs le cas de Thomas Lubanga, vous avez aussi le cas de Germain Ekatanga, vous avez aussi Mokom, vous avez aussi Laurent Gbagbo-Goudé et j'en passe. La liste est assez longue. Vous avez un deuxième point d'arrestation qu'on appelle les redditions volontaires, les personnes qui volontairement se rendent à la Cour. Dans ce cas, vous avez Jean Bosco Katanga, vous avez Ongwen, mais aussi on a tout récemment le cas d'Abdurrahman, qui se sont rendus aux autorités et qui ont facilité le transfert au niveau de la Cour. Même si pour Ongwen et Abdurrahman, cela résulte certainement des efforts déployés pour localiser, pour suivre, établir le contact, mobiliser les partenaires et les réseaux. Le cas de Taganda aussi fait également partie de ces efforts, mais il a pris la décision personnellement de se rendre à la Cour sans qu'il y ait contact préalable. Le troisième bloc, c'est les arrestations qui font suite à une stratégie de la Cour. Et là, on a 2 cas. On a le cas de Bemba, mais aussi on a le cas de Gaïsona. Bemba, comme vous le rappelez, il a été arrêté à la suite d'informations qui ont permis de suivre ses mouvements et qui ont permis de l'arrêter en Europe par la Belgique. Vous avez Gaïsona, la même chose, il a aussi été arrêté à la suite à travers les enregistrements de vol que nous avions pu faire et cette arrestation prouve quelque part que la coopération avec les autorités des points d'entrée des pays, les autorités douanières et policières de l'immigration, les compagnies aériennes et les autres autorités nationales chargées de l'application de la loi est essentielle pour le suivi et l'arrestation des suspects. Alors, voilà les 3 types de composantes que nous pouvons dégager. Qu'est-ce qui résulte de ces 3 tombes? Tout de suite, on se rend compte que la première composante, qui consiste à le transfert par les autorités nationales, est la composante la dominante, suivie par ce qu'on appelle le self-surrender, les gens qui se rendent volontairement. Alors, la stratégie elle-même que la Cour met en œuvre pour arrêter, on voit qu'elle est un peu, parce qu'elle ne concerne que 2 cas. Qu'est-ce que nous tirons de cela et quelle est la perspective que nous allons donner à ça? Cela veut dire tout simplement que l'analyse... D'abord, il faut justifier les raisons. Pourquoi? La raison principale, c'est que jusque-là, il n'y a pas d'équipe spécifique et spécifiée au niveau, en tout cas du bureau du procureur, qui est chargé de faire une stratégie claire. Nous avons ce qu'on appelle le SALT. C'est le bureau qui est en charge du suivi des suspects. Mais le SALT n'a pas de ressources en tant que tel, n'a pas d'équipe dédiée. C'est la raison pour laquelle, étant entendu que dans sa forme actuelle, elle n'est pas adaptée à son objectif et ne sera pas en mesure de fournir les résultats souhaités par le bureau, et que surtout depuis sa création, le SALT n'a pas bénéficié de ressources suffisantes pour développer pleinement l'ensemble de ces activités, et que aussi cela présente un risque pour le bureau du procureur, risque qui a été développé dans le plan stratégique 2023-2025 du bureau du procureur, qui pourrait certainement saper la confiance et l'impact du travail de la Cour. C'est dans cette optique-là, donc, je disais, que le bureau a décidé de disposer d'un mécanisme efficace de suivi qui aura pleinement les moyens et les capacités de procéder à des stratégies claires d'arrestation. Ce nouveau bureau que le bureau du procureur entend mettre en place va se concentrer sur un certain nombre de domaines. La principale, ce sera la définition des rôles et des responsabilités avec le bureau, avec le greffe, pour voir comment on va mettre en place cette stratégie-là. L'autre affaire qui n'existe pas et qui aussi va falloir mettre en place, c'est l'établissement des processus et des protocoles et des lignes directives pour l'arrestation. Ça aussi, c'est quelque chose de très important que cette équipe dédiée, une fois mise en place, pourra mettre en place. L'autre affaire, c'est la mise en place d'un réseau de partenaires. Vous avez parlé de coopération. Il faut des réseaux de partenaires et des réseaux de collaborateurs qui peuvent être sollicités pour aider à l'identification, à la localisation et aux stratégies d'arrestation. Il faut aussi, j'ai parlé du problème personnel et on me demande que le temps est assez fini. On peut dire quelques autres choses que le bureau pourra faire. Mais voilà un peu ce que je voulais dresser. D'une part, ce que nous avons pu faire. D'autre part, quelle est la perspective en tout cas du procureur. En vous remerciant, Monsieur l'ambassadeur.
C'est moi qui vous remercie, Monsieur Lee, de cette présentation, et je donne tout de suite la parole au coordonnateur des affaires extérieures au sein du greffe, Monsieur Salminen. Vous avez la parole, si possible, pour pas plus de 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, Excellences, distingués délégués. La Cour est à une période critique de son histoire. 16 mandats d'arrêt sont actuellement en attente d'être exécutés et ce nombre ne représente que les mandats d'arrêt publics. Sans arrestation, nous courons le risque d'avoir des salles d'audience vides. Cette perspective serait un affront aux victimes qui demandent justice et cela mettrait aussi en danger la légitimité de ce que la Cour a accompli, alors que nous célébrons le 25e anniversaire du statut de Rome. Dans un monde idéal, à la suite de l'émission d'un mandat d'arrêt par la Chambre, le greffe transmettrait une demande d'arrestation et de remise du suspect à un nombre d'États bien défini. La personne serait arrêtée dans de brefs délais et la procédure prévue à l'article 59 du statut de Rome serait déjà incorporée aux procédures pénales nationales. La remise à la Cour du suspect sert d'organiser dès la fin de la procédure nationale et son transfert jusqu'à La Haye prendrait place dans un avion mis à disposition par un État partie. Mr. Ambassador, the reality today is unfortunately quite different. It will take states parties, together with the court, both the Office of the Prosecutor and the Registry within our respective mandates, to work together to devise political, operational, and financial strategies geared towards the arrest of these fugitives. As the Registrar already mentioned, the creation of a specific unit for suspects at large within the registry will allow experts to allocate time to develop networks and partnerships and propose creative solutions together with states who bear the ultimate responsibility for arresting the persons against whom an ICC arrest warrant has been issued. Such examples include the use of artificial intelligence, finding legal solutions, and offering rewards or financial incentives to support the arrest of fugitives. One of the ideas on the table is to encourage further cooperation among states in specific regions so that like-minded states can pool their resources to achieve the desired results. We've learned a great deal after 17 arrest operations. One of the lessons learned has been the importance for states to have strong implementing legislation, enabling the judiciary at the national level to be in charge of the execution of the arrest warrant, thus removing any potential political dimension in the arrest process. Another is that the involvement of the court in tracking fugitives needs to be continuous, and only through this involvement can we increase the chances that our requests are prioritized and answered. Through such partnerships with national authorities, we can help states to receive the up-to-date information that is so crucial to securing arrests. Now, Mr. Ambassador, I know we are pressed for time, so I will conclude my remarks, but before doing so, please allow me to thank the 9 states parties who have executed arrest operations pursuant to ICC's requests, namely the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Central African Republic, Chad, Mali, Côte d'Ivoire, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Niger. And please allow me also to thank Ambassadors of France and Senegal as the co-facilitators for cooperation, for your steadfast support on this important issue. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour cette intervention très précieuse. Et je donne maintenant la parole à notre dernière panéliste, Madame Orlowski, directrice du programme CPI et droit international pénal de l'International Bar Association.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. I am grateful for this opportunity to address you today on behalf of the International Bar Association, International Criminal Court, and International Criminal Law Program on this important topic. The arrest and surrender of suspects to the ICC represents a key moment in the justice process. Because the court does not have the ability to arrest and surrender suspects, the court's ability to advance from investigation to trial is fully dependent on the cooperation of states parties. The court itself has identified the lack of implementation of arrest warrants as a major strategic risk for the effective execution of the ICC's mandate. The execution of arrest warrants is likewise the first priority affirmed by the yearly ASP resolution on cooperation, which expresses concern over the fact that warrants of arrest remain outstanding over 16 individuals, while still others may be outstanding that have been issued under seal. Yet, the Rome Statute does not set out a detailed procedure that states parties must follow in the execution of these requests, leaving a degree of procedural flexibility for states parties to meet their obligations. Without specific procedural guidance in the Rome Statute, it becomes of the utmost importance for states parties to establish national frameworks, focused in particular on political and operational support to ensure prompt response to the requests for arrest and surrender of persons to the ICC, as also recommended in the IER report. In addition, other forms of cooperation established by Article 93 of the statute contribute significantly to the court's effort to trace suspects, including the identification of whereabouts of persons and the location of items. These obligations should also be considered and implemented in the development of national frameworks for cooperation. For its part, the Assembly, in line with the mandate established by the Resolution on Cooperation, should increase its efforts to facilitate a comprehensive and systematic consideration of measures to increase the prospects of arrest, taking into account the experience of national, international, and hybrid tribunals. Consideration should be given to the development of conditionality policies creating positive or negative incentives for the cooperation of states parties in the arrest and surrender of suspects, as well as positive and negative incentives for the accused to voluntarily surrender. These policies should be enacted in close coordination with national authorities and/or international and regional organizations. As states parties develop procedures to cooperate with the court in the arrest and surrender of suspects, it is important to bear in mind the essential obligation to protect fair trial rights. Ensuring that arrest and surrender respects the rights of suspects safeguards the legal process before the court and may prevent delays and additional litigation in the pretrial phase. The rights of the arrested person are well established by the Rome Statute and relevant international human rights instruments. Article 59(2) of the statute establishes that an arrested suspect should be brought without delay before the competent judicial authority in the custodial state to determine, inter alia, if the person's rights have been respected. National procedures should reaffirm the rights of the arrested person and determine which remedies could be applied in the case of their violation in close consultation with the ICC pretrial chamber that has jurisdiction over the case. States parties should give effective implementation to the Rome Statute provisions, giving the arrested person the right to bring a challenge on the basis of the principle of ne bis in idem, and to seek interim release pending surrender. National procedures should also clearly specify the documentation that national authorities require the court to submit, as such documentation may vary from state to state. Finally, it is important to recall that the obligations for states parties to cooperate in the arrest and surrender of suspects represent only a facet of the more general duty of states parties to cooperate with the court. In addition to creating national frameworks for the effective implementation of cooperation obligations, states parties should increase their efforts towards ratifying and implementing the Agreement on Privileges and Immunities of the ICC, concluding voluntary agreements with the court, and ensuring adequate funding for the Trust Fund for Family Visits. Arrest and surrender is the first step from which other cooperation obligations follow, including the ability to implement judicial orders for provisional and final release, and ensuring the right to family life can be respected while in ICC detention. While cooperation is essential to achieve arrest and surrender, it is equally important for the court to have the necessary cooperation for the stages that follow. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Je vous remercie, Madame, et je remercie donc l'ensemble des panélistes qui nous ont fait des présentations extrêmement riches sur les expériences et attentes en matière d'arrestation. Je vais maintenant donner la possibilité aux délégations et de pouvoir s'exprimer et en remerciant les interprètes qui ont accepté de dépasser un tout petit peu l'heure de 13 heures, qui est normalement l'heure de fin de notre réunion. Donc je vais prier évidemment les intervenants à partir de maintenant d'être particulièrement disciplinés dans leur temps de parole. Alors j'ai tout d'abord le plaisir de donner la parole à la délégation du Mexique. Madame l'ambassadeur, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Facilitateur. Distinguidos delegados, jueces y funcionarios de la Corte Penal Internacional, representantes de la sociedad civil. Para que la Corte Penal Internacional esté en condiciones de cumplir plenamente con el mandato establecido en el Estatuto de Roma, es primordial que la cooperación de los Estados parte, de otros Estados y de organismos internacionales como las Naciones Unidas y sus agencias. Es de suma importancia terminar con la impunidad de los autores de los crímenes más graves cometidos contra la humanidad. Por ello, hacemos un llamado a los Estados parte a intensificar la cooperación con la Corte, incluyendo la ejecución de las 17 órdenes de arresto de sospechosos que están pendientes y aquellas solicitudes relativas a investigaciones financieras, el congelamiento y confiscación de bienes. Por otro lado, México invita a aquellos estados que aún no lo han hecho a ratificar o adherirse al Estatuto de Roma para lograr la universalidad del sistema. Además, reitera la importancia de promulgar o modificar las legislaciones nacionales que nos permitan cooperar y cumplir con las solicitudes realizadas por la CPI. Todos estos son elementos importantes para cumplir con el objetivo de investigar y juzgar los crímenes del Estatuto, donde quiera que estos ocurran. Antes de concluir, la Delegación de México desea reafirmar su apoyo y compromiso a la Corte Penal Internacional en términos de cooperación. En particular, damos la bienvenida a la nueva política sobre cooperación y complementariedad del fiscal Karim Khan y a las propuestas para mejorar y desarrollar distintas modalidades de cooperación del secretario Osvaldo Zavala. Tengan la plena certeza de que en México pueden contar un aliado. Muchas gracias.
Merci, Madame l'ambassadeur. Je donne maintenant la parole à la délégation de Roumanie pour 2 minutes. Merci.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. First, I want to thank the 4 speakers for their intervention, as well as the cooperation facilitation for the opportunity to intervene on behalf of the focal points on non-cooperation: Argentina, Ireland, Sierra Leone, Vanuatu, and Romania, to shed light on an important instrument that states parties have at their disposal in preventing cases of non-cooperation, namely the Toolkit on Non-Cooperation. This document is useful in the scenario when the court has not referred a matter of non-cooperation to the Assembly yet, but there are reasons to believe that a serious incident of non-cooperation, including a request for arrest and surrender of a person, is about to occur or is ongoing, and urgent action by the Assembly may bring about cooperation. In this case, what is needed is an urgent but informal response at the diplomatic level. And of course, the ASP president has a vital role in leading the response, and the focal points have to assist the president, but states parties can also play an important role, and the toolkit can guide their action. By way of example, the toolkit encourages monitoring through diplomatic network and obtaining early information about the future travel plans of persons subject to an arrest warrant. It also encourages the exchange of information with the court and the focal points by states, international and regional organizations, and civil society if they become aware of such travel plans. In terms of preventing instruments, the toolkit contains templates to draw on in encouraging states to meet their cooperation obligations in relation to the arrest and surrender of persons subject to a warrant, such as draft statements, draft note verbals, talking points, draft media releases, and draft tweets. So it really allows for a case-by-case and tailored approach that state parties can draw on. As focal points, we intend to continue raising awareness about this useful instrument, and we encourage delegations to consult the toolkit, which is available on the ASP website, and use it as needed. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame. Et donc, je donne maintenant la parole à la délégation française, la priant là aussi de ne pas dépasser 2 minutes. Merci.
Merci. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Tout son soutien à la Cour pénale internationale. Celle-ci doit nécessairement passer par une pleine et entière coopération en matière d'arrestation. L'exécution des mandats d'arrêt est essentielle pour que la Cour puisse mettre en œuvre son mandat. Comme dans les autres matières relatives à la coopération, la Cour est aussi dépendante des États. Alors les États peuvent mettre en place des mesures pratiques pour améliorer la coopération, en particulier avec le bureau du procureur et le greffe qui ont précisé les besoins plus particuliers aujourd'hui. D'abord, le partage spontané d'informations, quand l'État est en possession d'informations sur des individus en fuite. Ensuite, la sensibilisation des services de police et d'enquête nationaux au mandat de la Cour. Ensuite, l'organisation de réunions régulières avec les services nationaux compétents, soit en amont d'une demande d'assistance, soit en réponse à celle-ci. L'identification aussi de points de contact au niveau national qui peuvent répondre très rapidement aux demandes urgentes de la Cour, en particulier celles concernant la confirmation d'informations relatives à la localisation d'individus. La mise à disposition de moyens aériens pour le transfert d'un individu après son arrestation. Alors chaque État a des moyens différents en fonction de ses ressources et du contexte national, mais nous avons un but commun, soutenir la Cour et rendre justice aux victimes. La France encourage tous les États partis et non partis à identifier les bonnes pratiques en matière de coopération, les partager et mettre en œuvre celles qui sont en mesure d'appliquer. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Et je donne maintenant la parole à la délégation des États-Unis. Madame l'ambassadeur, vous avez la parole.
Thank you very much for inviting us again to participate in this plenary on cooperation. With many more fugitives at large than in courtrooms in The Hague, the slow pace of arrests represents a major impediment to justice in a number of ICC situation countries. It's clear that we all have much more to do at both practical political support and practical assistance in order to ensure the court can carry out its mandate. The United States remains committed to supporting the ICC's efforts to apprehend fugitives in a range of situations, and we've worked to update our own sources of information in order to track their movements, many of whom have been at large for far too long. In the United States, we have a very unique tool to contribute to creating additional information to assist in apprehension efforts. This is our War Crimes Rewards Program. This program enables us to offer rewards for up to $5 million for information leading to the arrest, transfer, or conviction of individuals who've been designated into the program for war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide. The program seeks to encourage individuals who can be family members or other associates to come forward with information to help locate fugitives so they can face charges against them. So far, the program has been very successful. Since Congress first created this authority, we've paid out over $8 million in rewards and contributed to over 20 cases at the international level. When it comes to the ICC, Joseph Kony has been designated under our program since 2013, and we have ramped up our outreach efforts, which has already elicited valuable information. We continue to evaluate a number of other ICC situations in which offering rewards for the arrests of the remaining fugitives might help advance the ICC's efforts, and we expect to publicly announce additional designations in the near future. This topic was the subject of a side event earlier this week, co-hosted by France, Ecuador, and South Africa. Several key themes and lessons learned emerged. First, fugitive tracking requires a range of multidisciplinary tools, including open source information using modern technology and gathering information from the person's digital footprint, but also old-fashioned human intelligence. Several panelists discussed the importance of identifying a complete profile of the fugitive and his or her associates and mapping out their psychological, financial, and social elements of the person's patterns of life. Building strong relationships of trust with bilateral, multilateral, and international partners is essential when dealing with international crimes. Building these networks in advance of a transnational operation is critical so that the various actors can move quickly and in sync when the time presents itself. States must ensure that appropriate domestic legal framework is in place in order to advance and enable the necessary steps to effectuate an arrest and eventual transfer to the court. There have been several occasions, including when the United States discovered an accused genocidaire living in Texas, when states have lacked a legal framework to transfer an individual to an international court. This, of course, can lead to delays and legal challenges. We also learned that civil society and private actors can have unique access to information that might not be available to national or international authorities. For example, strong, trusted connections with diaspora communities. These can develop and generate important leads or linkage evidence. So building these public-private partnerships can be fruitful. And finally, we learned that there's an element of serendipity in this work. Sometimes small developments can suddenly open the door to major progress, especially if the necessary tools, relationships, legal authorities, and networks are already in place. We look forward to continuing to work with states parties and non-parties alike, along with other key stakeholders, on these and other cooperation issues, which are essential to supporting justice for atrocity crimes. Thank you for including us in this important and timely conversation.
Merci beaucoup, Madame l'ambassadeur, pour votre contribution à notre débat. Et je donne maintenant la parole au titre de la société civile au représentant de Lawyers for Justice in Libya, en lui demandant de ne pas dépasser 2 minutes. Merci.
Distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, it is an honor to stand before you today on behalf of Lawyers for Justice in Libya and partner organizations in Libya. This ASP takes place at a pivotal moment for the ICC's investigation into Libya. Last month, the prosecutor announced to the Security Council that his office aims to complete all investigative activities in relation to Libya by the end of 2025. The prosecutor failed to provide reasons to believe that his office would be able to complete the investigations within this time frame. The insufficient cooperation of the Libyan authorities with the ICC continues to hinder the progress of the investigations. As reported in the prosecutor's briefing, the metrics set by his office to measure successful cooperation with the Libyan authorities have not been met. This manifests in a number of areas, including the lack of efforts to facilitate the court's access to Libya, to provide all requested documents relevant to the investigations, and the execution of arrest warrants, and the transfer of suspects. Moreover, the Libyan judiciary is unable and unwilling to genuinely investigate and prosecute perpetrators of serious international crimes. The Libyan authorities continue to impose a crackdown on civil society. Those who interact with the ICC are exposed to serious risks of reprisals from the militias affiliated to the Libyan authorities. In light of these elements, and in the context of meager, meaningful results achieved by the ICC to date, we call on the prosecutor to re-examine his plans to conclude the investigations by 2025 and to consult with relevant stakeholders, including civil society, in developing such plans, as outlined in his roadmap presented to the Security Council in 2022. We urge state parties to provide the court with adequate resources, including budget increases, to enable the court to successfully accomplish its mission. We urge the court, as well as state parties, to demand genuine cooperation by the Libyan authorities, which should go beyond welcoming official visits.
Je vais vous demander de conclure, excusez-moi.
And must include efforts to secure the arrest and transfer of suspects to the court, enabling safe and unselective access to victims and affected communities, and protecting and promoting civil society actors working towards accountability. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Nous arrivons à la fin de la liste des orateurs inscrits et j'ai le plaisir de redonner la parole à mon collègue sénégalais pour conclure cette session.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Excellence, Monsieur le Ministre. Excellence, Mesdames, Messieurs, chers experts et panélistes. Nous avons écouté avec attention et intérêt vos différentes interventions relatives à la thématique cruciale des arrestations. À ce stade, je voudrais, en mon nom propre, mais également en celui de l'ambassadeur Alabrune et de l'ambassadeur Momar Gueye, vous remercier sincèrement de vos contributions remarquables à ces travaux. Compte tenu du fait que le statut de Rome ne permet pas de juger un accusé par contumace, la concrétisation de la justice, son efficacité et son aboutissement exigent que les personnes concernées soient appréhendées par les autorités compétentes et présentées le plus tôt possible à la juridiction. Pour atteindre cet objectif, la coopération internationale revêt une importance fondamentale, non seulement celle émanant des pays de situation, mais aussi d'autres États où les fugitifs peuvent s'établir ou transiter. Cette tâche qu'il nous incombe d'accomplir comporte des difficultés non négligeables, dans la mesure où, outre les considérations politiques, militaires et géostratégiques, les fugitifs bénéficient souvent de complicités qui rendent complexes les tentatives d'arrestation. Néanmoins, avec une plus grande synergie d'action, des progrès tangibles pourraient être réalisés dans ce domaine. Avant de lever la plénière de ce matin, permettez-moi de vous remercier tous d'avoir bien voulu prendre part à cette session sur la coopération. Je décerne une mention spéciale aux interprètes pour leur patience. Je voudrais vous souhaiter donc une excellente suite des travaux de la 22e session de l'Assemblée des États partis au statut de Rome. La séance est levée.